Welcome to another video on stories of our history. Imagine the year 1119, in the dusty, crowded streets of Jerusalem, a city that had been captured by the armies of the First Crusade exactly 20 years earlier. The Holy City, which had been under Muslim rule for over 400 years, was now the capital of a fragile Christian kingdom, surrounded by enemies and constantly under threat. Pilgrims from Europe, who had risked their lives to travel to the site of Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, were preyed upon by bandits on the roads from the port of Jaffa to the Holy City. It was in this atmosphere of danger and devotion that a French nobleman named Hugues de Payens, along with 8 other knights including Godfrey of Saint-Omer, presented themselves to King Baldwin II and announced their intention to form a new order of warrior monks. Their stated mission was simple and noble: to protect the unarmed pilgrims on their journey to the holy places. The king, recognizing the value of such a force, granted them quarters in the royal palace, which was located on the Temple Mount, the vast, artificially expanded plateau that had once been the site of Solomon's temple and that now housed the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. For the first 9 years of their existence, from 1119 to 1128, the Knights Templar, as they would later be called, did almost nothing that would be expected of a military order dedicated to protecting pilgrims. They did not patrol the roads in any systematic way. They did not fight any recorded battles against the Saracens. They did not admit any new members to their ranks. The 9 original knights remained 9, a small, secretive band of warriors who rarely left the confines of the Temple Mount. The contemporary chroniclers, such as Fulcher of Chartres and William of Tyre, noted the existence of the order with a mixture of admiration and puzzlement. William of Tyre, writing several decades later, described how the knights were granted quarters in the royal palace and how they lived in poverty and piety. But he offered no explanation for their apparent inactivity. The question of what the 9 knights were doing for those 9 years has been one of the great unsolved mysteries of the medieval world. The Temple Mount, which was the location of the Templars' first headquarters, is a place of immense archaeological and religious significance. The mount is a vast, flat platform, covering approximately 36 acres, which was created by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BC as part of his massive expansion of the Second Temple. The platform was built by constructing enormous retaining walls and filling the space between them with earth and rubble, creating a level surface on which the temple could stand. Beneath the platform, there is a labyrinth of tunnels, vaults, cisterns, and subterranean chambers that have been explored for centuries by archaeologists, treasure hunters, and mystics. The Templars, who were quartered in the royal palace on the south side of the mount, were living directly above this underground world. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, which the Crusaders had converted into a royal palace, was built on a series of substructures that were known as Solomon's Stables, a vast, vaulted underground hall that was believed to date from the time of the ancient temple. The legend that the Templars were secretly excavating the Temple Mount, searching for the lost treasures of Solomon's temple, first emerged in the decades after the order's dissolution. According to this legend, which has been repeated and elaborated by generations of esoteric writers, the 9 knights were not idle during their first 9 years. They were digging. They were working their way down through the substructures of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, into the ancient tunnels and cisterns that honeycombed the mount, in search of the sacred objects that had been hidden beneath the temple before the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC or the Roman destruction in 70 AD. The treasure they were seeking, according to different versions of the legend, included the Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated chest that contained the tablets of the 10 Commandments, the menorah, the 7-branched candelabra of solid gold that had illuminated the holy place, the sacred scrolls of the Torah, or even the secret knowledge of the ancient Hebrews, a wisdom that had been passed down from Moses and Solomon. The sudden and dramatic rise of the Templar Order, from a band of 9 obscure knights to the most powerful institution in Christendom, is the central puzzle that the excavation legend seeks to explain. In 1128, just 9 years after their founding, Hugues de Payens returned to Europe and attended the Council of Troyes, where the order was officially recognized by the Church and given its own rule, written by the great Cistercian abbot, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. The Templars were granted the right to wear their distinctive white mantles with the red cross, and they were given a stream of donations, privileges, and recruits that transformed them, within a few decades, into a multinational corporation with commanderies across Europe and the Holy Land. They became the bankers of kings and popes, the masters of a vast financial empire, and the most feared warriors on the battlefields of the Crusades. The legend asks, what did Hugues de Payens bring back from Jerusalem in 1128? What was the secret that convinced Bernard of Clairvaux, the most powerful religious figure of the age, to champion the cause of 9 obscure knights? The answer, according to the believers, is that he brought back the proof of an archaeological discovery that would change the course of history. The physical evidence for the Templar excavations is, like so much of the order's history, fragmentary and contested. The Temple Mount, which is now under the control of the Muslim authorities, has been largely inaccessible to Western archaeologists for centuries. However, in the 19th century, a series of daring British expeditions, led by figures such as Captain Charles Warren of the Royal Engineers, explored the subterranean structures beneath the mount. Warren, who was working for the Palestine Exploration Fund, discovered a network of ancient tunnels, vertical shafts, and hidden chambers that honeycombed the rock of the mount. He found artifacts that dated from the Templar period, including spurs, pieces of armor, and the distinctive cross puttee of the order. He also found evidence of ancient excavation, of tunnels that had been dug through solid rock in search of something hidden. The discoveries of Warren and his successors provide a tantalizing glimpse of the underground world that the Templars may have explored. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was the Templars' headquarters, is itself a building of immense historical and archaeological complexity. The mosque, which was built in the 8th century, stands on a series of substructures that were constructed by Herod the Great to support the southern end of the temple platform. These substructures, which are known as Solomon's Stables, consist of a vast, vaulted hall, supported by rows of massive pillars, that was used by the Crusaders as a stable for their horses. The Templars, who were quartered in the mosque above, would have had direct access to these underground chambers. The stables, which are now closed to the public, have been the subject of intense speculation by treasure hunters and archaeologists, who have long believed that they conceal entrances to even deeper tunnels and hidden chambers. The legend of the Templar excavations is inextricably linked to the broader mystery of the lost treasures of the Temple of Solomon. The Ark of the Covenant, which was the most sacred object in the ancient Jewish faith, disappeared from the historical record after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem in 586 BC. The menorah and the other sacred vessels of the temple were carried off to Rome by the Emperor Titus after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, but their subsequent fate is unknown. The Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered at Qumran in 1952, contains a list of hidden treasure caches, including vast quantities of gold and silver that were buried beneath the Temple Mount before the Roman destruction. The possibility that the Templars, in their excavations, discovered one or more of these ancient treasures is the central premise of the legend. The historical context of Jerusalem in the early 12th century is essential for understanding the Templar excavations. The city, which had been captured by the armies of the First Crusade in July 1099 after a bloody siege, was a place of profound religious significance for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. The Crusaders, who had established the Kingdom of Jerusalem, were a small and embattled Frankish ruling class, surrounded by a hostile Muslim population and constantly threatened by the armies of the Seljuk Turks and the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt. The city was a melting pot of cultures and religions, and its streets were filled with pilgrims, merchants, and adventurers from every corner of Europe. The Temple Mount, which was the holiest site in Judaism and one of the holiest in Islam, was now under Christian control. The Dome of the Rock, which the Crusaders believed to be the Temple of the Lord, was converted into a Christian church, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque became the royal palace. The choice of the Temple Mount as the Templars' headquarters was not a random decision. Hugues de Payens and his companions were not just warriors. They were men of faith, deeply devoted to the biblical tradition. The Temple of Solomon, which had stood on the mount for over 1,000 years, was the central symbol of the Jewish faith and a prefiguration of the Christian Church. The Templars, by taking the temple as their namesake and their home, were making a profound theological statement. They were the new guardians of the sacred mountain, the heirs of the ancient priests, and the Levites. Their decision to base themselves on the Temple Mount was also a practical one. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, which had been converted into the royal palace, was a vast, fortified building that provided secure accommodation for the knights and their horses. The underground substructures, the famous Solomon's stables, offered ample space for stabling and storage. The Temple Mount was a natural fortress, and the Templars were its new garrison. The exact location of the Templars' quarters within the Al-Aqsa complex is a matter of archaeological debate. The mosque, which is a large, rectangular building with a central nave and several aisles, was used by the Crusader kings as a palace before being granted to the Templars. The knights are believed to have occupied the southern part of the building, which had direct access to the underground stables. The stables, which are a series of massive, vaulted halls, were originally built by Herod the Great as part of the substructure of the temple platform. They were expanded and modified by the Umayyad caliphs in the 8th century, and they were used by the Crusaders for their horses. The stables, which are now closed to visitors and are used as a mosque, have been the subject of intense archaeological curiosity for centuries. The belief that they conceal entrances to deeper tunnels and hidden chambers is a persistent one. The ancient substructures beneath the Temple Mount are a labyrinth of tunnels, cisterns, and chambers that were constructed over a period of more than 1,000 years. The earliest of these structures date from the time of the First Temple, which was built by King Solomon in the 10th century BC. The Second Temple, which was rebuilt by Zerubbabel in the 6th century BC and massively expanded by Herod the Great in the 1st century BC, added a further layer of complexity. The Romans, who destroyed the temple in 70 AD, filled many of the underground chambers with rubble. The Byzantines, the Umayyads, and the Crusaders all added their own constructions to the subterranean maze. The result is a deeply stratified archaeological site, a vertical palimpsest that contains the accumulated debris of 3,000 years of human history. It was into this underground world that the 9 Templar Knights, according to the legend, ventured in search of hidden treasure. The legend of the Templar excavations is not a modern invention. It has its roots in the medieval period. The chronicler William of Tyre, who was writing in the 1170s, noted that the Templars had dug up the area around the Al-Aqsa Mosque and had discovered many ancient relics. What these relics were, William does not say. But his passing remark is a crucial piece of evidence, a sign that the Templars were, in fact, engaged in some form of archaeological activity. The Jewish traveler Benjamin of Tudela, who visited Jerusalem around 1170, reported that the Templars had discovered the tombs of the ancient kings of Judah beneath the Temple Mount. These medieval accounts, while fragmentary and often embellished, suggest that the belief in the Templar excavations was already current in the 12th century. The silence of the Templars themselves on the subject of their excavations is one of the most powerful arguments in favor of the legend. The order, which kept meticulous records of its financial transactions and its military campaigns, left no account of any archaeological discoveries. This silence, which has been interpreted by skeptics as evidence that no such discoveries were made, can also be interpreted in the opposite way. If the Templars had discovered something of immense value, the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred scrolls, or a vast treasure of gold, they would have had every reason to keep it a secret. The knowledge of such a discovery would have been a dangerous thing, inviting the avarice of kings and the scrutiny of the Church. The Templars, who were masters of secrecy, would have buried the truth in the deepest vaults of their order. The rapid expansion of the Templar order after 1128 is a historical fact that demands an explanation. In less than a decade, a band of 9 knights who had been living in poverty and obscurity became the most celebrated military order in Christendom, receiving vast donations of land and money from the nobility of Europe. The mystery of the Templars' sudden wealth has been a puzzle for historians for centuries. The conventional explanation that they were the beneficiaries of a wave of crusading enthusiasm and the patronage of Bernard of Clairvaux is plausible but insufficient. The scale and the speed of the Templars' rise suggest that something extraordinary had happened, something that had convinced the powerful and the pious to shower the order with their favor. The legend of the secret excavations provides a compelling answer. The Templars had found a treasure, and they had used it to buy their way into the heart of the Christian world. The figure of Hugues de Payens, the founder and first Grand Master of the Knights Templar, is at the center of the excavation mystery. Hugues was a knight from the Champagne region of France, a vassal of the powerful Count Hugh of Champagne, who was himself a crusader and a patron of the Church. Hugues de Payens was a man of deep piety and considerable military experience, but he was also a man of ambition and vision. He understood that the key to power in the medieval world was the possession of sacred relics and the patronage of the Church. His decision to found the Templar order on the Temple Mount, and his subsequent journey to Europe in 1128 to seek the approval of the Pope and the Council of Troyes, were acts of strategic genius. Hugues de Payens was not just a warrior, he was a diplomat, a politician, and if the legend is true, an archaeologist. The 9 years that Hugues de Payens and his companions spent on the Temple Mount, from 1119 to 1128, are the lost years of the Templar story. The official records of the order, which were meticulously kept, are silent on this period. The chroniclers of the Crusader kingdom, who recorded the events of the time in detail, make only passing references to the Templars. The 9 knights, during these 9 years, were invisible. They did not fight, they did not recruit, and they did not seek public attention. Their only known activity, according to the chronicler William of Tyre, was to live in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and to protect the pilgrims, a task that they seem to have performed, if at all, with a remarkable lack of enthusiasm. The silence of the sources has created a vacuum that the excavation legend has filled. The number 9, which was the number of the original knights, has a profound symbolic significance in the esoteric tradition. 9 is the number of completion, the final digit before the return to unity. It is the number of the celestial spheres in medieval cosmology, and the number of the choirs of angels. The fact that the Templars remained at 9 for 9 years, without admitting a single new member, is a detail that has been seized upon by esoteric writers as evidence of a secret purpose. The knights, in this interpretation, were not just a military unit, they were a circle of initiates, a group of 9 who were engaged in a sacred task that required their undivided attention and their absolute secrecy. The excavation of the Temple Mount was not just a treasure hunt, it was a spiritual quest, a search for the hidden wisdom of the ancients. The relationship between Hugues de Payens and Bernard of Clairvaux is a crucial element of the mystery. Bernard, who was the most influential theologian of the 12th century and the driving force behind the Cistercian reform, was the Templars' greatest champion. He wrote the rule of the order, he preached the Second Crusade, and he used his immense prestige to secure the papacy's approval of the Templars. The conventional explanation for Bernard's support is that he saw in the Templars the embodiment of his ideal of a new knighthood, a fusion of the warrior and the monk. But the excavation legend offers a more tantalizing possibility, that Bernard was the custodian of a secret that Hugues de Payens had brought from Jerusalem, a secret that convinced him of the Templars' divine mission. The journey of Hugues de Payens to Europe in 1127-1128, which culminated in the Council of Troyes, was a tour of triumph. He visited the courts of France, England, and Scotland, recruiting knights, receiving donations, and spreading the fame of the new order. He also, according to some accounts, delivered a mysterious cargo to Bernard of Clairvaux, a set of documents or artifacts that had been discovered in the excavations on the Temple Mount. The nature of this cargo is a matter of speculation: the Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll, the lost books of the Bible, or the secret teachings of the Essenes. Whatever it was, it had a profound effect on Bernard, who became the Templars' most fervent advocate and their most powerful protector. The success of the Council of Troyes, which gave the Templars their official sanction and their rule, was the direct result of Hugues de Payens' journey and the secret that he carried. The Council of Troyes, which met in January 1128, was a pivotal moment in the history of the Templars. The council, which was presided over by the papal legate, Cardinal Matthew of Albano, and which was attended by Bernard of Clairvaux and a host of bishops and abbots, officially recognized the Order of the Temple and gave it its own rule. The rule, which was written by Bernard, was a masterpiece of monastic legislation, blending the spiritual disciplines of the Cistercian tradition with the practical needs of a military order. The council also granted the Templars the right to wear their distinctive white mantles and to recruit new members. The transformation of the Templars from a small, obscure band of knights into a fully fledged religious order was now complete. The question of what Hugues de Payens presented to the council, behind closed doors, remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of the Templar story. The immediate aftermath of the Council of Troyes was a period of explosive growth for the Templars. The donations of land, money, and recruits poured in from across Europe. The order, which had consisted of 9 knights in 1128, numbered hundreds within a decade, and thousands by the end of the 12th century. The Templars became the bankers of kings and popes, the guardians of the holy places, and the shock troops of the Crusades. Their rapid rise to power, which has no parallel in medieval history, is the ultimate testimony to the genius of Hugues de Payens and the secret that he may have discovered beneath the Temple Mount. The Templar excavations, if they were real, were the foundation upon which the entire edifice of the order was built. The archaeological reality of the Temple Mount, which is known to Muslims as the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, is a subject of immense complexity and controversy. The Mount, which is the third holiest site in Islam, has been a place of continuous religious and political significance for over 3,000 years. Its subterranean structures, which have been explored by archaeologists and treasure hunters for centuries, are a palimpsest of the different civilizations that have ruled Jerusalem. The first Temple of Solomon, the second Temple of Herod, the Roman colony of Aelia Capitolina, the Byzantine churches, the Umayyad mosques, and the Crusader palaces have all left their physical traces on the Mount. The Templars, who were quartered in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, were living at the center of this archaeological wonderland, with direct access to the underground tunnels and chambers that honeycombed the rock beneath their feet. The geology of the Temple Mount is a crucial factor in understanding the possibility of secret excavations. The Mount is not a natural hill, it is an artificial platform, created by Herod the Great by building massive retaining walls and filling the space between them with earth and rubble. The native rock of the mountain, which is known as the foundation stone or the Even HaShatiyah, is exposed at the center of the mount, inside the dome of the rock. The rock is honeycombed with natural caves and fissures, which have been enlarged and connected over the centuries by human hands. The southern end of the mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque stands, is supported by a series of massive vaults and substructures, known as Solomon's Stables, that were built by Herod and later expanded by the Umayyads. These substructures, which are open at the top and filled with earth, provided the Templars with a perfect location for secret digging. The explorations of Captain Charles Warren, who was sent to Jerusalem in 1867 by the Palestine Exploration Fund, are the most important source of information about the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount. Warren, who was a brilliant engineer and a courageous explorer, spent 3 years in Jerusalem, digging shafts and tunnels to explore the foundations of the Mount. His most famous discovery was a deep vertical shaft, now known as Warren's Shaft, that descends into the rock beneath the city of David. But his work on the Temple Mount itself was equally significant. He explored the network of cisterns and tunnels that lie beneath the platform, mapping their dimensions and documenting their contents. He found evidence of ancient quarries, of water systems, and of secret passages that had been used by the inhabitants of the Mount for millennia. The specific discoveries made by Warren beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque are of particular relevance to the Templar legend. Warren, who was working under difficult and often dangerous conditions, discovered a series of vertical shafts and horizontal tunnels that had been dug through the rubble and the rock beneath the mosque. These tunnels, which were clearly of medieval origin, were filled with debris that dated from the Crusader period. Among the artifacts that Warren recovered from the tunnels were fragments of Templar pottery, pieces of chain mail, and a number of iron spurs of a type that was used by the Frankish knights. The presence of these artifacts in the deep tunnels beneath the Al-Aqsa suggests that the Templars were, in fact, active in the subterranean world of the Temple Mount. Whether they were digging for treasure, for water, or for some other purpose remains a matter of debate. The discovery of the Templar artifacts in the tunnels beneath the Al-Aqsa was a sensational event in the world of 19th-century archaeology. The artifacts, which were sent to the British Museum in London, were studied by the leading scholars of the day, The spurs, which were of a distinctive type with a rowel, or rotating wheel, were identified as belonging to the 12th century, the period of the Templars' occupation of the mosque. The pottery, which included fragments of cooking pots and storage jars, was also dated to the Crusader period. The artifacts provided the first tangible, physical evidence that the Templars had been active in the underground structures of the Mount, and they gave a powerful boost to the legend of the secret excavations. The tunnels that Warren discovered were not just random burrowings. They were carefully engineered constructions, with vertical shafts that descended to a depth of over 50 feet and horizontal galleries that extended for hundreds of yards. The walls of the tunnels were cut through solid rock, and they showed signs of having been worked with iron tools. The purpose of these tunnels has been a subject of debate. Some scholars have argued that they were part of a sophisticated water system, designed to collect rainwater and store it in cisterns. Others have argued that they were escape routes, built to allow the defenders of the Mount to flee in the event of a siege. But the legend offers a third explanation. They were exploratory shafts, dug by the Templars in their search for the hidden treasures of Solomon's Temple. The archaeological record of the Temple Mount is, unfortunately, incomplete. The Mount, which is under the jurisdiction of the Muslim Waqf, has been largely off-limits to Western archaeologists since the British Mandate ended in 1948. The political and religious sensitivities of the site, which is one of the most contested places on Earth, have prevented any systematic, scientific excavation of the subterranean structures. The discoveries of Warren and his successors, which were made under the auspices of the Ottoman Empire, remain the primary source of archaeological information about the underground world of the Mount. The full extent of the Templars' excavations, and the secrets that they may have uncovered, remain buried beneath the sacred rock, waiting to be discovered by a future generation of archaeologists. The Ark of the Covenant, the gold-plated chest that was the most sacred object in the ancient Jewish faith, is the ultimate prize of the Templar excavation legend. The Ark, which was built by Moses at the command of God, was a rectangular box of acacia wood, overlaid with pure gold, and surmounted by two golden cherubim facing each other. Inside the ark were the tablets of the Ten Commandments, the stone tablets that God had given to Moses on Mount Sinai. The ark was the throne of God on earth, the dwelling place of the divine presence, the Shekinah. It was carried by the Israelites through the wilderness, it was present at the fall of Jericho, and it was eventually placed in the Holy of Holies of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem. The ark was the center of the Jewish faith, the physical link between heaven and earth, and the most powerful object in the world. The fate of the Ark of the Covenant after the destruction of Solomon's Temple by the Babylonians in 586 BC is one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of history. The biblical account of the fall of Jerusalem, which is recorded in the second book of Kings, does not mention the Ark among the treasures that were carried off to Babylon. The prophet Jeremiah, who was an eyewitness to the catastrophe, is said to have hidden the ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, but the exact location of the cave is unknown. The second book of Maccabees, which was written in the 2nd century BC, repeats the tradition that Jeremiah hid the ark and that its location would remain a secret until the last days. The ark, after the fall of Jerusalem, simply vanishes from the historical record, leaving only a trail of legends, rumors, and desperate hopes. The possibility that the Ark of the Covenant was hidden beneath the Temple Mount, rather than being carried off to Babylon, is a theory that has been advanced by a number of scholars and archaeologists. The theory is based on the fact that the temple was not just a building, it was a fortress, a complex of chambers, passages, and underground vaults that could have concealed a precious object from the invaders. The Babylonian army, which sacked Jerusalem and burned the temple, may not have discovered the secret chamber where the ark was hidden. The ark, in this scenario, remained beneath the Temple Mount, waiting to be discovered by a future generation of Israelites, or by a band of 9 French knights who were living on the Mount and who had the time, the resources, and the motivation to search for it. The Templars' search for the Ark of the Covenant, if it occurred, would have been driven by both religious and political motives. The Ark was not just a relic of the Jewish faith. It was a symbol of divine authority, a tangible link to the God of the Old Testament. The possession of the Ark would have given the Templars an immense spiritual prestige, acclaimed to be the true successors of the ancient priests of Israel. It would also have given them a powerful bargaining chip in their dealings with the church and the secular powers. The Ark, which was the throne of God, was the ultimate sacred object, and its possessor would have been able to wield an authority that rivaled that of the Pope himself. The Templars, who were the sworn defenders of the Holy Land, would have seen the recovery of the Ark as the fulfillment of their divine mission. The Copper Scroll, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered in the caves of Qumran in 1947-1956, is a crucial piece of evidence in the mystery of the lost temple treasures. The Copper Scroll, which is unlike any of the other Dead Sea Scrolls, is not a religious text, it is a treasure map. It lists 64 locations where vast quantities of gold, silver, and sacred vessels were hidden. The scroll, which is written on copper and dates from the 1st century AD, is believed to be a record of the treasures that were hidden by the priests of the temple before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The locations listed on the scroll are cryptic and difficult to identify, but many of them are believed to be in the area of the Temple Mount. The Copper Scroll provides independent, contemporary evidence that a great treasure was hidden beneath the Temple Mount, a treasure that the Templars may have discovered. The menorah, the 7-branched golden candelabra that stood in the holy place of the temple, is another of the lost treasures that the Templars are said to have sought. The menorah, which was made of solid gold and weighed over 100 pounds, was one of the most sacred objects in the Jewish faith. It was carried off to Rome by the Emperor Titus after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and its image was carved on the Arch of Titus, which still stands in the Roman Forum. The subsequent fate of the menorah is unknown. It was said to have been taken to Carthage by the Vandals in the 5th century, and then to Constantinople by the Byzantine general Belisarius in the 6th century. Some legends claim that it was hidden in the sewers of Rome or that it was returned to Jerusalem and buried beneath the Temple Mount. The menorah, like the Ark, is a symbol of the lost glory of the temple, and its recovery would have been a triumph of immense proportions. The possibility that the Templars discovered not just physical treasure, but secret knowledge, the lost scrolls of the Bible, the teachings of the Essenes, or the wisdom of the ancient Hebrews, is an equally compelling part of the legend. The Temple of Solomon was not just a treasury of gold and silver, it was a library, a repository of the sacred texts that had been accumulated over the centuries. The Templars, who were men of faith and learning, would have been as interested in the discovery of ancient manuscripts as they were in the discovery of gold. The secret knowledge that they uncovered in the depths of the Temple Mount, according to the esoteric tradition, was the source of their power and their wisdom, a Gnostic tradition that had been passed down from the ancient Egyptians through the Hebrews to the Crusader Knights. The role of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux in the Templar mystery is a subject of immense importance and debate. Bernard, who was born in 1090 into a noble family in Burgundy, was the most influential religious figure of the 12th century, a man whose word could make or break a king. He was the driving force behind the Cistercian reform, a movement that sought to return monasticism to its original purity and simplicity. He was a mystic, a theologian, and a politician, a man of immense learning and profound piety. His decision to become the champion of the Knights Templar, to right their rule, and to secure the papacy's approval of their order was one of the most consequential acts of his career. The question of why Bernard, who was a man of such austerity and such orthodoxy, would embrace a band of obscure knights from Jerusalem is a question that has haunted historians for centuries. The conventional explanation for Bernard's support of the Templars is that he saw in them the embodiment of his own ideal of a new knighthood. In his treatise in praise of the new knighthood, which he wrote around 1130, Bernard celebrated the Templars as a new breed of warrior, men who combined the courage of the knight with the discipline of the monk. He contrasted the evil knights of the secular world, who fought for vanity and greed, with the Templars, who fought for the glory of God and the protection of the weak. This treatise, which is one of the foundational texts of the Templar order, is a brilliant piece of rhetoric, but it does not fully explain the depth of Bernard's commitment. The Templars were not just a pious idea, they were a real, and initially very small, organization. Bernard's involvement with them went far beyond the usual patronage of a great abbot. The excavation legend offers a more specific and compelling explanation for Bernard's devotion to the Templars. According to this theory, Hugues de Payens, on his journey to Europe in 1127-1128, delivered to Bernard a cache of documents or artifacts that had been discovered in the excavations on the Temple Mount. These documents, which may have included early Christian or Jewish texts, provided Bernard with a direct, tangible link to the world of the Bible. They confirmed the authenticity of the Templars' mission and revealed a secret that Bernard, as a mystic and a theologian, was uniquely qualified to understand. The secret, in this theory, was the proof that the Templars were the true heirs of the ancient Israelites, the new guardians of the sacred mountain, and the chosen instruments of God's plan for the redemption of the world. The specific nature of the secret that Bernard may have received from Hugues de Payens is a matter of speculation. Some researchers have suggested that it was a version of the Gospel of John that contained secret teachings of Jesus, teachings that challenged the orthodox doctrine of the Church. Others have suggested that it was a genealogy, tracing the descent of the Merovingian kings of France from the bloodline of Jesus Christ. Still others have suggested that it was a treatise on sacred geometry, the mathematical principles that had been used to build the Temple of Solomon, a knowledge that was the foundation of the Masonic craft. Whatever the secret was, it had a profound effect on Bernard, and it transformed him from a cautious observer of the Templars into their most fervent and effective advocate. The writings of Bernard of Clairvaux, particularly his sermons on the Song of Songs, are filled with imagery that is suggestive of a secret, esoteric tradition. Bernard, who was a mystic of the highest order, described the soul's union with God in terms that were both erotic and ineffable. He spoke of the kiss of the bridegroom, the wine of divine love, and the darkness, that is the cloud of unknowing. His language, which was deeply influenced by the Neoplatonic tradition, has been interpreted by some esoteric scholars as a coded description of an initiatory experience, a direct encounter with the divine that was the goal of the Templars' secret quest. The possibility that Bernard was an initiate of a hidden tradition, a tradition that was passed down from the Essenes through the Templars, is a tantalizing but unproven hypothesis. The political implications of Bernard's support for the Templars were immense. The Church, in the 12th century, was a vast and powerful institution, but it was also riven by internal conflicts and threatened by external enemies. The Pope, who was the head of the Church, was often a weak and contested figure, dependent on the support of the secular powers. The Templars, who were an international order, answerable only to the Pope, provided the papacy with a powerful and independent military force. Bernard's endorsement of the Templars at the Council of Troyes was a crucial step in the creation of this papal army. The Templars, with their unique status as a religious order of warrior monks, became the shock troops of the papacy, the guardians of the faith, and the enforcers of the Pope's will. The secret that Bernard protected was, in this sense, the secret of papal power. The relationship between Bernard and the Templars was a complex and mutually beneficial one. The Templars provided Bernard with a tangible expression of his ideals of chivalry and monasticism. Bernard provided the Templars with the theological and political legitimacy that they needed to become a global force. The two were, in a sense, two sides of the same coin, the mystic and the warrior, the contemplative and the active, the priest and the knight. The secret that they shared, whatever it was the bond that united them, a bond that was stronger than any political alliance or financial arrangement. The secret of the Temple, which was buried in the heart of Bernard's mysticism and in the foundations of the Templar order, is the key to understanding the spiritual revolution of the 12th century. The discoveries of Charles Warren in the 19th century, which provided the first solid archaeological evidence of Templar activity beneath the Temple Mount, were a sensation that reverberated through the scholarly world. Warren, who was a captain in the Royal Engineers, was sent to Jerusalem by the Palestine Exploration Fund, a British organization that was dedicated to the scientific exploration of the Holy Land. His mission was to survey the city, to map its ancient ruins, and to investigate the subterranean structures that lay beneath its streets. Warren, who was a man of immense courage and determination, descended into the deep shafts and tunnels that honeycombed the Rock of Jerusalem, often at great personal risk. His discoveries, which were published in a series of reports and books, transformed the understanding of the ancient city. The method that Warren used to explore the subterranean structures was both brilliant and hazardous. Unable to excavate the Temple Mount directly, he dug deep shafts down through the rubble outside the walls, and then drove horizontal tunnels at various levels to reach the foundations of the mount. He descended into the ancient cisterns and the water systems, mapping their dimensions and documenting their contents. He was lowered on ropes into deep, vertical shafts that had been dug by the ancient inhabitants of the city, shafts that were filled with debris and darkness. Warren's work was a pioneering example of archaeological stratigraphy, the careful recording of the layers of soil and debris that accumulate over centuries of human occupation. The specific tunnels that Warren discovered beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque are the most tantalizing pieces of evidence for the Templar excavation legend. These tunnels, which were located deep beneath the surface of the mount, were not natural caves or ancient water systems. They were deliberately excavated passages, cut through solid rock. The walls of the tunnels showed the marks of iron tools, and they were lined with masonry that dated from the Crusader period. The tunnels were connected to vertical shafts that descended from the area of the mosque, shafts that could have been used by the Templars to access the underground world. Warren's descriptions of these tunnels, which he published in his 1876 book Underground Jerusalem, are a vivid account of a hidden, medieval world that had lain undisturbed for centuries. The artifacts that Warren recovered from the tunnels beneath the Al-Aqsa were a crucial part of his discoveries. Among the debris that filled the tunnels, Warren found fragments of pottery that were unmistakably of Crusader origin, including cooking pots and storage jars that were of a type used by the Frankish settlers. He found pieces of chain mail, the distinctive armor of the medieval knight, and several iron spurs of the type that were worn by the heavy cavalry of the Crusader armies. The most significant finds were several small, metal crosses of the type that were worn by the Templar knights as a symbol of their order. These artifacts, which were found in the deepest and most inaccessible parts of the tunnels, proved beyond a reasonable doubt that the Templars had been present in the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount. The interpretation of Warren's discoveries has been a subject of debate among archaeologists and historians. The conventional scholarly view is that the tunnels were part of a sophisticated water management system that had been built by the Umayyad caliphs in the 8th century and that was later used by the Crusaders. The Templar artifacts, in this view, were simply debris that had fallen or been washed into the tunnels from the surface. The alternative view, which is championed by the proponents of the excavation legend, is that the tunnels were exploratory shafts, dug by the Templars in their search for the hidden treasures of the temple. The fact that the tunnels were carefully engineered and that they descended to considerable depths suggests that they were not just random burrowings, but part of a systematic campaign of underground exploration. The work of Charles Warren was continued by other explorers in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The French archaeologist Louis Hugues Vincent, who worked in Jerusalem in the early 1900s, conducted a detailed study of the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount and documented the Crusader remains. The British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon, who excavated in Jerusalem in the 1960s, used the methods of modern stratigraphic archaeology to uncover the history of the ancient city. The cumulative work of these and other researchers has confirmed that the Temple Mount is a site of immense archaeological complexity, a palimpsest of civilizations that is still yielding its secrets. The limitations of the current archaeological knowledge of the Temple Mount are immense. The Mount, which is under the control of the Muslim authorities, has been largely inaccessible to scientific excavation since the mid-20th century. The political and religious tensions that surround the site, which is one of the most contested places on Earth, have prevented any systematic, large-scale investigation of its subterranean structures. The discoveries of Warren and his successors were made under the auspices of the Ottoman Empire, and they represent a window into a world that is now largely closed to Western researchers. The full extent of the Templars' excavations, and the secrets that they may have uncovered, remain buried beneath the sacred rock, waiting for a future era of peace and cooperation. The Copper Scroll, one of the most enigmatic and tantalizing of the Dead Sea Scrolls, is a crucial piece of evidence for the theory that a great treasure was hidden beneath the Temple Mount. The scroll, which was discovered in Cave 3 at Qumran in 1952, is unlike any of the other Dead Sea Scrolls. It is not made of parchment or papyrus, but of copper, a durable metal that was intended to preserve its contents for a long time. The scroll is not a religious text, it is a list, a detailed inventory of 64 locations where vast quantities of gold, silver, and sacred vessels were hidden. The scroll, which dates from the 1st century AD, is believed to be a record of the treasures that were hidden by the priests of the temple before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The contents of the copper scroll are staggering in their detail and their scale. The scroll lists specific locations, often identified by cryptic landmarks, and gives the exact quantities of treasure that are hidden there. The total amount of gold and silver that is listed on the scroll is estimated to be over 100 tons, a sum that is almost unimaginable. The treasure includes not just bullion, but also sacred vessels, priestly garments, and scrolls. The locations that are listed on the scroll are scattered throughout the land of Israel, but a significant number of them are believed to be in the area of Jerusalem, and specifically in the vicinity of the Temple Mount. The copper scroll is, in effect, a treasure map, a guide to the hidden riches of the ancient Jewish state. The interpretation of the copper scroll has been a subject of intense debate among scholars. Some have argued that the scroll is a genuine historical record, an inventory of the temple treasures that were hidden before the Roman destruction. Others have argued that the scroll is a work of fiction, a piece of folklore or a literary exercise that was never intended to be taken literally. The quantities of treasure that are listed on the scroll are so vast that some scholars have suggested that they represent the total wealth of the Jewish nation, not a single cache. The debate over the authenticity of the copper scroll is likely to continue, but its existence provides a tantalizing context for the legend of the Templar excavations. The connection between the copper scroll and the Templars is a matter of speculation, but it is a speculation that is grounded in the facts of the scroll's discovery. The Dead Sea Scrolls, including the Copper Scroll, were discovered in the years following the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. However, the contents of the scrolls, particularly the Copper Scroll, were known to a small circle of scholars for many years before they were made public. The possibility that a medieval copy of the Copper Scroll, or a similar document, was discovered by the Templars is a real one. The Templars, who were living on the Temple Mount and who were actively excavating its subterranean structures, could have found a document that described the location of the hidden treasures. The specific locations that are listed on the Copper Scroll are often described using landmarks that are now difficult or impossible to identify. The scroll refers to the cistern of the temple, the cave of the column, and the tomb of the high priest, among other places. The scroll also mentions a sealed cave that contains 70 talents of silver. The Temple Mount, with its labyrinth of underground tunnels and chambers, is a prime candidate for many of these locations. The Templars, who were exploring these tunnels, could have followed the clues on the scroll and discovered the hidden caches. The Copper Scroll is a roadmap to a lost world, a world that the Templars may have been the last to enter. The fate of the treasures that are listed on the Copper Scroll, if they were ever real, is unknown. Some of the caches may have been found by the Romans, who sacked Jerusalem in 70 AD. Others may have been found by the Byzantines, the Arabs, or the Crusaders. The majority of the treasure, if it existed, is likely still buried in the ground, waiting to be discovered. The Templars, who were the most active excavators on the Temple Mount in the medieval period, were the best placed to have found it. The legend that they discovered the treasure of the Copper Scroll, and that this treasure was the source of their sudden wealth and power, is a compelling and plausible one. The mystery of the Copper Scroll is a reminder of the hidden riches that lie beneath the surface of the Holy Land. The scroll, which was discovered in a cave by the Dead Sea, is a testament to the determination of the ancient priests to preserve their sacred treasures from the Roman invaders. The Templars, who were the heirs to the Crusader kingdom, were the inheritors of this tradition of hiding and seeking. Their excavations on the Temple Mount were not just a treasure hunt, they were a quest for the lost glory of the temple. a search for the physical remains of a faith that had been the foundation of Western civilization. The copper scroll, in its silent, metallic voice, is a witness to that quest. The esoteric and Masonic traditions that have grown up around the legend of the Templar excavations are a rich and complex tapestry of symbol, myth, and ritual. The Freemasons, who trace their origins to the medieval stonemasons' guilds, have a deep and abiding connection to the Temple of Solomon. The building of the temple, which is the central allegory of the Masonic craft, is a symbol of the moral and spiritual transformation of the individual. The Masonic lodges are designed to represent the temple, with their pillars, their altars, and their tracing boards. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Temple Mount, and who are said to have discovered the secret wisdom of the ancient builders, are the natural ancestors of the Masonic craft. The legend of the Templar excavations is a cornerstone of the Masonic tradition. The Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry, which is one of the most important of the appendant degrees, is explicitly concerned with the rediscovery of the lost secrets of the temple. The ritual of the Royal Arch tells the story of the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon after the Babylonian exile. The sojourners, who are working on the foundations of the new temple, discover a hidden vault, a secret chamber that contains the lost word of a master mason. The vault, which is a representation of the Holy of Holies, is the symbolic heart of the Masonic tradition. The discovery of the vault is a metaphor for the recovery of the ancient wisdom, the secret knowledge that was lost at the death of Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's temple. The legend of the Templar excavations is a historical parallel to the Masonic myth of the Royal Arch. The Masonic tradition of the secret vault, which is a central part of the Scottish Rite degrees, is another version of the same essential story. The secret vault is a hidden chamber beneath the temple, where the most precious treasures and the most secret knowledge were concealed. The vault, which is guarded by a series of doors and obstacles, can only be entered by the initiate who has the proper keys and the proper knowledge. The Templars, who are said to have discovered the secret vault beneath the Temple Mount, are the historical models for the Masonic initiates. The excavation of the vault is the central act of the Templar legend, and it is reenacted in the rituals of the Masonic degrees. The esoteric interpretation of the Templar excavations is that the treasure they discovered was not physical gold, but spiritual wisdom. The gold that they found was the lost knowledge of the ancient Hebrews, the gnosis that had been passed down from Moses and Solomon. This wisdom, which was encoded in the dimensions of the temple and in the rituals of the priests, was the source of the Templars' power. It gave them an understanding of the universe, of the nature of God, and of the destiny of the human soul that was far beyond the orthodox theology of the medieval church. The Templars, in this interpretation, were the custodians of a secret tradition, a Gnostic church that existed within the shell of the Catholic faith. The symbols that are associated with the Templars, the cross petit, the Lamb of God, the two knights on a single horse, are all, in the esoteric tradition, representations of the secret wisdom. The cross petit, with its 4 arms of equal length, is a symbol of the balance of the 4 elements and the 4 directions. The Lamb of God, which is the Agnus Dei, is a symbol of the sacrifice of Christ, but it is also a symbol of the initiate who has been purified and made ready for the divine. The two knights on a single horse are a symbol of the union of opposites, the fusion of the active and the contemplative, the material and the spiritual. The Templars, in their symbolism, were encoding the secrets that they had discovered in the ruins of the temple. The Masonic and esoteric traditions that are centered on the Templar excavations are a living, evolving body of knowledge. The secrets of the temple, which were discovered by the 9 knights, have been passed down through the centuries, from the Templars to the Freemasons, from the Rosicrucians to the modern occult orders. The quest for the lost wisdom continues, and the Temple Mount remains the symbolic center of that quest. The excavations that were conducted by the Templars in the 12th century are the historical model for the spiritual excavations that every seeker must undertake. The treasure that they found, whatever it was, is the treasure that is promised to all who have the courage to dig deep into the foundations of their own being. The reign of King Baldwin II of Jerusalem, who granted the Templars their quarters on the Temple Mount, is a crucial period in the history of the Crusader kingdom. Baldwin, who was the cousin of the first Crusader king, Godfrey of Bouillon, was a capable and determined ruler who faced the daunting task of defending a small, vulnerable kingdom against a host of powerful enemies. He spent much of his reign campaigning against the Seljuk Turks and the Fatimid Egyptians, and he was constantly in need of soldiers and resources. His decision to grant the Templars a home on the Temple Mount, and to give them their mission of protecting the pilgrims, was a practical measure designed to address a pressing security concern. But it was also a decision that would have unforeseen and world-changing consequences. The relationship between the Templars and the kings of Jerusalem was one of mutual dependence and occasional friction. The Templars, who were an independent order answerable only to the Pope, were a valuable military asset, but they were also a potential rival to the royal authority. The kings of Jerusalem relied on the Templars to garrison key castles and to provide troops for their campaigns. The Templars, for their part, depended on the support of the crown for their legal and financial privileges. The relationship was a delicate balance, and it was often strained by the Templars' growing power and their reputation for arrogance and secrecy. The king who had given them their home on the Temple Mount may have had little idea of what they were doing in the depths of that holy mountain. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, which the Templars were sworn to defend, was a strange and unique political entity, a European colony planted in the heart of the Middle East. The Franks, as the Crusaders were known, were a small minority in their own kingdom, ruling over a population that was predominantly Muslim and Eastern Christian. They built castles, cathedrals, and fortified cities, creating a civilization that was a blend of the European and the Levantine. The Temple Mount, which was the most sacred site in the kingdom, was a symbol of the Frankish conquest and a focus of religious devotion. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Mount, were the embodiment of the Crusader ideal, a fusion of the warrior and the pilgrim. The fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem to Saladin in 1187, after the disastrous Battle of Hattin, was a catastrophe that shook the Christian world. The true cross, the most sacred relic in the kingdom, was captured by the Muslims, and the holy places fell back into the hands of the infidel. The Templars, who had played a central role in the defense of the kingdom, suffered heavy losses at Hattin, and their Grand Master, Gerard de Riefort, was executed by Saladin. The fall of Jerusalem, and the subsequent loss of the Temple Mount, was a turning point in the history of the Templars. Their original mission, to protect the pilgrims and the holy places, was now impossible to fulfill. The order, which had been founded on the Temple Mount, was now an army without a home. The loss of the Temple Mount did not end the Templar excavations. The order, which was now based in Acre and other coastal cities, continued to be obsessed with the site of the ancient temple. According to some accounts, the Templars maintained a secret presence in Jerusalem, and they continued to explore the subterranean structures of the Mount through a network of informants and agents. The memory of the temple, and the secrets that were buried beneath it, remained the central focus of the Templar identity. The excavations, which had begun in the 12th century, had become a part of the order's DNA, a sacred quest that was passed down from generation to generation. The final fall of the Crusader kingdom, with the loss of Acre in 1291, was the end of the Templar presence in the Holy Land. The order, which had been founded to defend the holy places, was now expelled from them. The survivors retreated to Cyprus, and then to Europe, where they would face a new and more deadly enemy, the greed and the ambition of the King of France. The Temple Mount, which had been the cradle of the order, was now a distant memory, a lost world that could only be revisited in the imagination. But the secrets that had been discovered in its depths, the treasures and the wisdom, were carried by the Templars into their new life in the West. The legacy of the Templar excavations, whatever they may have found, is the enduring mystery that we have been exploring. The Temple Mount, which is still a place of conflict and devotion, continues to guard its secrets. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig are long gone, but their legend lives on. The excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, were the foundation of the Templar myth, a myth that has inspired crusaders, Freemasons, treasure hunters, and seekers of every description for nearly 1,000 years. The secrets of the temple remain hidden, but the quest to find them has become a permanent part of the human story. The physical challenges and dangers of excavating beneath the Temple Mount in the 12th century were immense. The mount, as we have described, is not a solid mountain but an artificial platform, constructed of massive retaining walls that were filled with earth and rubble. The fill, which is hundreds of feet deep in places, is an unstable mixture of soil, stone, and ancient debris. Digging through this material was a task that required considerable engineering skill and no small amount of courage. The risk of a tunnel collapse, of being buried alive under tons of rubble, was a constant and terrifying threat. The Templars, who were warriors, not miners, must have had some form of technical expertise to undertake such an operation, perhaps acquired from the local people of Jerusalem who had been digging wells and cisterns in the city for centuries. The methods that the Templars would have used to excavate the Temple Mount were the same methods that had been used by miners and quarrymen since ancient times. They would have begun by breaking through the floor of the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the walls of the substructures, using picks, hammers, and iron bars. The rubble that they excavated would have been carried out in baskets, hauled up through the vertical shafts, and dumped in the nearby valleys or used as fill for other construction projects. The tunnels would have been supported by timber shoring, to prevent the walls from collapsing. The work would have been slow, laborious, and dangerous, requiring a team of workers who were both skilled and motivated. The ventilation and lighting of the underground tunnels would have been a major challenge. The deep shafts and galleries, which were far from any natural source of light, would have been shrouded in absolute, Stygian darkness. The Templars would have illuminated their work with oil lamps, clay pots filled with olive oil and a floating wick, which produced a smoky, flickering light. The air in the tunnels, which was often stale and damp, would have been a constant problem, requiring the digging of air shafts to the surface to provide ventilation. The conditions in the tunnels, which were cramped, dark, and poorly ventilated, would have been physically and psychologically punishing. The knights who undertook this work were not just treasure hunters. They were ascetics, men who were willing to endure extreme hardship in the pursuit of their sacred goal. The secrecy that surrounded the Templar excavations was a matter of both practical necessity and institutional culture. The Temple Mount, which was the most contested piece of real estate in the world, was constantly under the scrutiny of the Muslim and Christian authorities. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Mount, had a privileged position, but they were also subject to the oversight of the king and the patriarch. The excavations, which were a violation of the sacred site, would have been condemned by the church and the local population if they had been made public. The Templars, who were masters of secrecy, kept their work hidden from the outside world, burying the evidence of their digging deep within the underground labyrinth. The disposal of the excavated rubble was a significant logistical problem. The Temple Mount is a vast area, but the removal of tons of earth and stone would have been noticed by the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The Templars, according to some theories, used the rubble to construct some of the buildings and fortifications of the city, or they dumped it into the Kidron Valley, which was a convenient and discreet location. The absence of large piles of excavated debris near the Temple Mount is, in itself, a minor mystery, suggesting that the Templars were careful to dispose of their waste in a way that would not attract attention. The human cost of the Templar excavations, in terms of injuries and deaths, is unknown, but it must have been considerable. The dangerous work of tunneling through unstable ground, in the dark and the damp, would have taken a toll on the health and the safety of the workers. The Templars, who were warrior monks, were accustomed to the risks of battle, but the risks of mining were of a different order, a slow, grinding, and often invisible danger. The knights who died in the tunnels, crushed by a falling rock or suffocated by a lack of air, would have been buried in secret, their names forgotten, their sacrifice unrecorded. The technological and logistical capabilities of the 12th century are often underestimated by modern observers. The Templars, who were at the forefront of the military and economic life of their time, had access to the best tools, the best materials, and the best expertise that was available. The building of the great Gothic cathedrals, which was taking place in Europe at the same time as the Templar excavations, demonstrates a mastery of stonework, engineering, and logistics that was truly remarkable. The Templars, who were deeply involved in the financing and the construction of these cathedrals, could draw on a network of skilled masons, miners, and engineers. The excavation of the Temple Mount was not the work of 9 isolated knights. It was a major engineering project that drew on the resources of the entire order. The specific artifacts that the Templars are rumored to have discovered during their excavations have been the subject of intense speculation for centuries. Beyond the Ark of the Covenant and the Copper Scroll, a host of other sacred and esoteric objects have been associated with the order. The Baphomet, the mysterious idol that the Templars were accused of worshipping, has been linked by some researchers to the Ark, to a mummified head, or to an alchemical device that was discovered in the ruins. The Urim and Thummim, the sacred stones that were used by the high priest of Israel for divination, are another lost relic that has been connected to the Templars. The rod of Aaron, which blossomed in the wilderness as a sign of divine favor, and the jar of manna, which contained the miraculous bread from heaven, are the other contents of the ark that, according to tradition, were hidden with it. The possibility that the Templars discovered a library of sacred scrolls, rather than just a treasure of gold and silver, is an equally tantalizing aspect of the legend. The Temple of Solomon was not just a place of sacrifice. It was a center of learning, a repository of the sacred texts that had been accumulated over the centuries. The scrolls that were hidden beneath the temple may have included lost books of the Bible, such as the Book of Enoch or the Book of Jubilees, which were known to the ancient world but were excluded from the canonical scriptures. They may have included the secret teachings of Moses, the oral law that was passed down from the patriarchs, or the wisdom of the Essenes, the Jewish sect that produced the Dead Sea Scrolls. The discovery of such a library would have been an intellectual and theological revolution, a challenge to the authority of the Church and a validation of the Templars' unique spiritual status. The connection between the Templar excavations and the legend of the Holy Grail is a powerful and enduring one. The Grail, which is the cup of the Last Supper, is the central object of the Arthurian romances and the most famous relic in Western literature. The Grail legend, which was fused with the Templar myth in the 12th and 13th centuries, tells the story of a sacred vessel that was brought to Britain by Joseph of Arimathea, guarded by a line of secret knights, and hidden in a mysterious castle. The Templars, who are often identified as the guardians of the Grail, are said to have discovered the sacred cup during their excavations on the Temple Mount, and to have brought it back to Europe after the fall of the Crusader kingdom. The specific location of the Templar excavations within the Temple Mount is a subject of ongoing debate. The most likely site, as we have discussed, is the area beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the substructures known as Solomon's Stables. This vast, vaulted hall, which is supported by rows of massive pillars, provided the Templars with direct access to the underground world. But the excavations may have extended far beyond the stables, into the deep cisterns and tunnels that honeycombed the rock of the mount. The Templars, according to some accounts, dug a tunnel from the Al-Aqsa Mosque to the Dome of the Rock, a distance of several hundred yards, in search of the secret chamber where the Ark was hidden. The involvement of the Jewish community of Jerusalem in the Templar excavations is a possibility that has been raised by some historians. The Templars, who were ignorant of the Hebrew language and the Jewish traditions, would have needed the assistance of local guides to interpret the clues that they discovered. The Jewish sages of Jerusalem, who preserved the memory of the temple and its secrets, may have collaborated with the Templars, sharing their knowledge in exchange for protection or financial reward. This theory suggests that the Templar excavations were not just a Christian treasure hunt, but a joint venture between the knights and the local Jewish community, a collaboration that would have been highly controversial and deeply secret. The legacy of the Templar excavations, in the form of the wealth and the power that the order accumulated, is the most visible evidence of their success. The Templars, within a few decades of their founding, became the most powerful financial institution in Europe, the bankers of kings and popes. Their treasure, which was stored in their commanderies and their castles, was legendary in its scale. The origin of this treasure has never been fully explained. The donations of the faithful, the profits of the wool trade, and the revenues of the Templar estates were substantial, but they do not seem to account for the sheer magnitude of the Templar wealth. The excavation legend, in this context, provides a compelling answer. The Templars found a treasure that was already ancient, a hoard of gold and silver that had been buried for over 1,000 years. The modern archaeological investigation of the Temple Mount, which is conducted under the auspices of the Israeli Antiquities Authority and the Muslim Waqf, is a highly sensitive and politically charged undertaking. The Mount, which is the third holiest site in Islam and the holiest site in Judaism, is a place of constant tension and conflict. Any archaeological work on the Mount is seen as a potential provocation, a threat to the fragile status quo. The Israeli authorities, who are responsible for the security of the site, have imposed strict limits on the excavation and the exploration of the Mount, and the Muslim authorities, who control the day-to-day administration, have been hostile to any interference by outside researchers. The archaeological investigation of the Temple Mount is a field that is fraught with danger and difficulty. The discovery of the Western Wall tunnels in the 1980s and 1990s, which was a major archaeological undertaking, provided a new window into the subterranean world of the Temple Mount. The tunnels, which run along the western retaining wall of the Mount, were excavated by the Israeli Ministry of Religious Affairs, following the line of the wall from the prayer plaza to the north. The excavation, which was conducted in secret and which was opposed by the Muslim authorities, uncovered a series of ancient structures, including a Herodian street, a Hasmonean water channel, and a massive stone that is believed to be part of the original wall of the temple. The Western Wall tunnels are a powerful demonstration of the immense archaeological complexity of the Temple Mount. The excavation of the Solomon's Stables area, which is located beneath the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount, has been a subject of particular controversy. The stables, which are a series of massive vaulted halls, are believed to date from the Herodian period, and they were used by the Crusaders, including the Templars, as stables for their horses. In 1996, the Muslim Waqf began a major construction project in the stables, converting the area into a new mosque, the Marwani Mosque. The work, which was carried out without proper archaeological supervision, involved the removal of thousands of tons of earth and rubble from the site, which was dumped into the Kidron Valley. The Israeli archaeologists, who sifted through the dumped rubble, recovered a wealth of artifacts, including pottery, coins, and building materials that dated from the First Temple period to the Crusader era. The controversy over the Marwani Mosque construction highlighted the immense archaeological and political sensitivities of the Temple Mount. The Muslim authorities, who are responsible for the administration of the Mount, view any archaeological investigation as a violation of the sacred site and a threat to their sovereignty. The Israeli authorities, who are responsible for the preservation of the antiquities, are caught between the need to protect the archaeological heritage and the need to avoid provoking a violent confrontation. The Temple Mount, which is a place of prayer and pilgrimage for millions of people, is also a battlefield, a place where the conflicts of the modern world are played out in the shadow of the ancient stones. The future of the Temple Mount, and of the archaeological investigation of its subterranean structures, is uncertain. The political and religious tensions that surround the site show no signs of abating, and the possibility of a peaceful, scientific exploration of the Mount seems as remote as ever. The secrets that are buried beneath the sacred rock, the treasures and the scrolls that the Templars may have discovered, remain hidden, waiting for a future era of peace and cooperation that may never arrive. The Temple Mount, in its silent and majestic endurance, is a symbol of the enduring power of the sacred, a power that transcends the conflicts and the controversies of the present. The role of technology in the future investigation of the Temple Mount is a source of hope for some researchers. Non-invasive techniques, such as ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and 3D laser scanning, have the potential to explore the subterranean structures without disturbing the surface. These technologies, which have been used with great success at other archaeological sites, could provide a detailed map of the underground world of the Mount, revealing the location of the cisterns, the tunnels, and the hidden chambers that the Templars explored. The application of these technologies to the Temple Mount would require the cooperation of the Muslim and Israeli authorities, a cooperation that is currently difficult to imagine, but that is not impossible in the long run. The legacy of the Templar excavations, whatever they may have found, is the enduring mystery that we have been exploring. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig are long gone, but their legend lives on. The excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, were the foundation of the Templar myth, a myth that has inspired crusaders, Freemasons, treasure hunters, and seekers of every description for nearly 1,000 years. The secrets of the temple remain hidden, but the quest to find them has become a permanent part of the human story. The Temple Mount, in its silent and majestic endurance, is a symbol of the enduring power of the sacred, a power that transcends the conflicts and the controversies of the present. The broader esoteric and philosophical implications of the Templar excavations are a subject that has fascinated mystics and scholars for centuries. The discovery of a hidden treasure, whether it was the Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll, or a library of secret wisdom, would have had a transformative effect on the order and on the course of Western history. The Templars, who were already a unique institution, would have become the custodians of a secret that challenged the very foundations of the medieval church. The knowledge that they possessed, whether it was a lost gospel, a sacred geometry, or a direct experience of the divine, would have set them apart from the ordinary clergy and the secular powers. The Templar excavations, in this sense, were not just a treasure hunt, they were a quest for the ultimate truth. The concept of the Prisca Theologia, the ancient theology that was believed to have been revealed to the patriarchs and passed down through a secret chain of initiates, is central to the esoteric interpretation of the Templar excavations. This ancient wisdom, which was said to be the source of all true religion and philosophy, was believed to have been possessed by the Egyptians, the Chaldeans, the Hebrews, and the Greeks. The Templars, who were the heirs to the Crusader kingdom and the guardians of the Temple Mount, were the natural recipients of this sacred knowledge. The excavations, which were a descent into the physical depths of the Mount, were also a symbolic descent into the depths of the past, a recovery of the lost wisdom of the ancients. The impact of the Templar excavations on the development of Western esotericism is a subject that has been explored by a number of historians and philosophers. The Rosicrucian manifestos of the 17th century, which claimed to be the work of a secret brotherhood of Christian initiates, drew heavily on the Templar legend. The Freemasons, who traced their origins to the Templars and the builders of Solomon's Temple, incorporated the symbolism of the secret vault and the lost word into their rituals. The modern occult revival of the 19th and 20th centuries, which produced figures such as Eliphas Levi and Aleister Crowley, was deeply influenced by the Templar myth. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which were the historical foundation of this myth, are the event that set all of these traditions in motion. The possibility that the Templar excavations were the catalyst for the Gothic architectural revolution of the 12th and 13th centuries is a fascinating theory. The Gothic cathedrals, which sprang up across Europe in the decades following the Council of Troyes, were a radical departure from the earlier Romanesque style. Their soaring arches, their ribbed vaults, and their vast expanses of stained glass were made possible by a new understanding of geometry and engineering. The Templars, who were the financiers and the builders of many of these cathedrals, are said to have brought back from Jerusalem the secret of the sacred geometry that had been used to build Solomon's Temple. The Gothic cathedral, in this interpretation, is a recreation of the temple, a new dwelling place for the divine that was built by the heirs of the Templars. The secret of the Templar excavations, whatever it was a knowledge that had the power to transform the world. The discovery of the Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll, or the lost books of the Bible would have been an event of immense religious and political significance. The Templars, who were the custodians of this secret, were the most powerful institution in Christendom. Their fall, in the early 14th century, was the result of the greed and the ambition of a French king, but it was also, perhaps, the result of the fear that their secret inspired in the hearts of the powerful. The Templars, who had delved too deeply into the mysteries of the past, were destroyed because they knew too much. The enduring legacy of the Templar excavations is the question that they have left behind. What did the 9 knights find in the darkness beneath the Temple Mount? Was it gold, scrolls, or a sacred relic? Or was it a spiritual truth, a direct experience of the divine, that transformed them from simple warriors into the guardians of the most powerful myth in Western history? The answer to this question is buried beneath the sacred rock of the Temple Mount, a place that is still, after 3,000 years, the most contested and the most mysterious place on earth. The story of the Templar excavations on the Temple Mount is, in the final analysis, a story about the human quest for the sacred, a quest that has driven pilgrims to travel thousands of miles, knights to risk their lives, and scholars to dedicate their careers. The Temple Mount, which is the center of this quest, is a place of immense power and mystery, a place where the divine and the human have met and struggled for millennia. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig in 1119 were the instruments of this quest, the agents of a destiny that they could not have foreseen. Their excavations, whether they were a systematic search for treasure or a symbolic act of devotion, were the foundation of the Templar legend, a legend that has captivated the imagination of the world. We have journeyed together through the history, the archaeology, and the esoteric traditions that surround the mystery of the Templar excavations. We have examined the evidence of the tunnels beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the artifacts that were discovered by Charles Warren, and the tantalizing clues of the Copper Scroll. We have explored the legends of the Ark of the Covenant, the lost scrolls of the Temple, and the secret wisdom of the ancients. The mystery of what the Templars found beneath the Temple Mount remains unsolved, but the quest to answer that question has been a journey of discovery in itself. The first part of our investigation has laid the groundwork for a deeper exploration. In the second part of the series, we will delve even further into the secrets of the Temple Mount, exploring the detailed accounts of the Warren expeditions, the Masonic and esoteric interpretations of the Templar excavations, and the modern archaeological controversies that continue to surround the sacred mountain. We will examine the theories that the Templars discovered the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or the lost teachings of Jesus himself, and we will trace the legacy of these discoveries through the history of the order and into the modern world. The work of Captain Charles Warren in the 19th century, which we have already begun to explore, deserves a far deeper and more forensic examination, for it is the bedrock of all modern archaeological understanding of the Templar presence beneath the Temple Mount. Warren was not merely a military engineer, he was a meticulous and courageous explorer who understood that the secrets of ancient Jerusalem were buried deep beneath the accumulated debris of 3,000 years of continuous human habitation. In 1867, under the sponsorship of the Palestine Exploration Fund, a British society founded by a group of clergymen, scholars, and aristocrats, Warren arrived in Jerusalem with a specific mandate: to investigate the subterranean structures of the city, and particularly of the Temple Mount, in order to illuminate the biblical narrative. The Ottoman authorities, who ruled the city, were highly suspicious of any European activity on the holy sites, and Warren was forced to conduct much of his exploration in secret, using a combination of diplomacy, bribery, and sheer audacity to gain access to the sacred ground. His methodology was as ingenious as it was dangerous. Unable to dig directly on the Temple Mount, he instead dug deep vertical shafts, some over 100 feet deep, at strategic points outside the walls, and then drove horizontal tunnels, sometimes for hundreds of yards, through solid rock and ancient rubble, directly toward the foundations of the mount. This approach, known as shaft and gallery mining, allowed him to bypass the politically sensitive surface and to access the hidden layers of the city's history. The discoveries that Warren made using this method were nothing short of revolutionary. His most famous find was the water system of the ancient city of David, including the deep vertical shaft that still bears his name, Warren's Shaft, which provided the Jebusites and the Israelites with secure access to the Gin Spring. But for our purposes, his most significant work was centered on the Temple Mount itself, where his tunnels pierced the massive retaining walls built by Herod the Great and penetrated the mysterious vaults and cisterns that lay beneath the platform. In the area south of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, near the Double Gate and the Triple Gate, Warren excavated a series of tunnels that led him to a complex of underground chambers that had clearly been used by the medieval inhabitants of the city. It was here that he made the discovery that connects him directly to the legend of the Templar excavations, a vertical shaft descending deep into the bedrock that was filled with a mixture of debris that included, unmistakably, artifacts from the Crusader period. The shaft was not a natural fissure, it had been cut through the rock by human hands, and its walls were blackened by the soot of ancient lamps. The debris that Warren extracted from this shaft, which he described in his published report The Recovery of Jerusalem, 1871, included fragments of Frankish pottery, pieces of chain mail, a beautifully preserved iron spur with a rowel, and most tellingly of all, several small metal crosses of the distinctive petit shape that was the symbol of the Knights Templar. The artifacts, which were carefully catalogued and sent to the British Museum, provided the first tangible, physical proof that the warrior monks had been active in the deep, subterranean world beneath the Temple Mount, far below the floor of their former palace. The specific location of this shaft is a matter of considerable importance. Warren's maps, which are held in the archives of the Palestine Exploration Fund in London, show that the shaft was located in the southeastern corner of the Temple Mount, in the area directly beneath the substructures that were known to the Crusaders as Solomon's Stables. The shaft descended vertically for a depth of over 50 feet, before opening out into a series of horizontal galleries that had been cut through the rock. The galleries, which Warren explored by candlelight, were not natural caverns. They were clearly man-made, with tool marks on the walls that indicated the use of iron picks and chisels. The purpose of these galleries, Warren concluded, was a mystery. They were not part of the ancient water system, for they were dry and lacked any evidence of plaster lining. They were not tombs, for they contained no human remains. They were, in Warren's own words, exploratory tunnels, excavations that had been dug deliberately in search of something. The presence of the Templar artifacts within these tunnels, at the deepest levels, suggested that the Knights had been the ones doing the searching. The Warren expedition had provided the first archaeological confirmation that the legend of the Templar excavations was not a mere myth, but a reflection of a real, physical activity that had taken place on the Temple Mount. The reaction to Warren's discoveries in the scholarly community of the 19th century was a mixture of fascination and skepticism. The Templar artifacts, which were exhibited at the British Museum and at meetings of the Royal Society, were recognized as genuine medieval objects, but their significance was debated. Some scholars argued that the presence of the artifacts in the deep tunnels was simply the result of the debris from the surface being washed down into the shafts over the centuries, a process known as fill intrusion. Others pointed to the fact that the tunnels were clearly exploratory, and that the Templars, who had lived on the Mount for over 60 years, would have had both the time and the motivation to explore the subterranean structures beneath their headquarters. The debate over the interpretation of Warren's finds continues to this day, but the artifacts themselves remain a silent and compelling witness. The small metal crosses, the spurs, the pottery shards, these are the physical remains of the men who once called the Temple Mount their home, and who, according to the legend, dug deep into its sacred rock in search of a hidden treasure. The limitations of the Warren expedition, which were imposed by the political and technological constraints of the 19th century, are important to acknowledge. Warren was unable to excavate the Temple Mount itself, and his tunnels were limited to the periphery of the platform. He was constantly harassed by the Ottoman authorities and by the local inhabitants, who were deeply suspicious of his motives. His methods, while pioneering for their time, were crude by modern standards, and his record-keeping, while detailed, was not always systematic. Despite these limitations, Warren's work remains the foundation of all subsequent archaeological investigation of the Temple Mount. His discoveries proved that the subterranean world of the Mount was a vast and complex labyrinth, and that the Templars had been active within it. The 9 Knights, who had been dismissed by some historians as a small and insignificant band, were revealed by Warren's spade to have been the participants in a great and secret archaeological quest. The foundations of the temple had been breached, and the legend of the hidden treasure had been given a physical, tangible anchor in the bedrock of Jerusalem. The legacy of Charles Warren extends far beyond his discoveries on the Temple Mount. He went on to a distinguished military career, serving as the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London during the Jack the Ripper murders, and his name is immortalized in the geography of Jerusalem. but his most enduring contribution is the window that he opened into the hidden history of the city, a window that allows us to peer into the darkness of the subterranean world and to catch a glimpse of the Templar knights, their lamps flickering against the ancient stone, as they dug their way into the heart of the sacred mountain. Warren's work, which was conducted in the spirit of scientific inquiry and imperial ambition, is a testament to the enduring power of the Templar myth, a myth that has inspired generations of explorers, archaeologists, and seekers to journey to Jerusalem and to search for the secrets that lie buried beneath the Temple of Solomon. The specific Templar artifacts that were recovered by Warren and by subsequent explorers in the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount are a small but significant collection of objects that provide a direct, tangible link to the warrior monks. The most iconic of these artifacts are the small metal crosses that were found in the deep tunnels, crosses that are unmistakably of the Templar type, with their 4 arms of equal length and their flared ends, the classic cross petit. These crosses, which are made of iron or bronze and which are often pierced for suspension, were not worn by the general population of the Crusader kingdom. They were the distinctive emblem of the military orders, worn on the white mantles of the Templar Knights as a public declaration of their sacred vows. The presence of these crosses in the deep tunnels, far from the surface and in association with the tools of excavation, is a powerful piece of evidence that the individuals who dug these tunnels were not just anonymous laborers, but members of the Order of the Temple, conducting their work under the direct supervision and authority of the knights themselves. The cross was their seal, their signature, left behind in the darkness of the underground world. The iron spurs that were found in the Warren tunnels are another crucial category of evidence. The spurs, which are of a distinctive design with a rotating rowel, were an essential piece of equipment for the medieval knight, used to control his warhorse in battle. The presence of spurs in the tunnels, which were clearly not riding environments, suggests that the knights who were doing the digging were wearing their full equipment, or at least a part of it, while they worked. This is a significant detail, for it indicates that the excavations were not a casual, informal activity, but a formal, organized operation, conducted by the knights in their capacity as members of the order. The spur, which was the symbol of the knight's status, was left behind in the tunnel, a silent witness to the presence of the warrior monks in the depths of the sacred mountain. The pottery fragments that were found in the tunnels are a more mundane, but equally important, category of evidence. The fragments, which were analyzed by the ceramicists of the British Museum, were identified as belonging to the Crusader period, specifically to the 12th century, the time of the Templars' occupation of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The pottery included the remains of cooking pots, storage jars, and water vessels, all of a type that was used by the Frankish settlers in the Holy Land. The presence of these domestic vessels in the deep tunnels suggests that the excavators were spending considerable periods of time underground, that they were eating and drinking in the tunnels, and that the excavations were a prolonged and systematic campaign, not a brief and hasty foray. The broken pots of the Templars are the humble remains of a great and secret undertaking. The chain mail fragments that were found in the tunnels are a final piece of the physical puzzle. Chain mail, which was the standard armor of the medieval knight, was made of thousands of interlinked iron rings, and it was heavy, uncomfortable, and prone to damage. The fragments that were found in the tunnels were likely the remains of discarded or damaged pieces of armor, left behind by the knights as they worked in the cramped and dirty conditions of the underground. The presence of chain mail in the tunnels, along with the spurs, suggests that the knights were wearing at least some of their armor while they excavated, a sign that they were prepared for a fight, even in the depths of the earth. The Templars were warriors first and foremost, and even in their role as archaeologists, they did not forget their primary identity. The interpretation of these artifacts by modern archaeologists is a subject of ongoing debate. The conventional view, as we have noted, is that the artifacts were not found in their original context, but were simply debris that had been washed or dumped into the tunnels from the surface. The tunnels, in this view, were not Templar excavations, but ancient water systems or cisterns that were later used as convenient repositories for rubbish. The alternative view, which is championed by the proponents of the excavation legend, is that the artifacts are in their original context, that they were left behind by the Templars in the course of their digging, and that they are the physical evidence of a real and prolonged archaeological campaign. The debate over the interpretation of the artifacts is a reflection of the larger debate over the history of the Temple Mount, a debate that is shaped by political, religious, and ideological commitments as much as by the evidence itself. The absence of any large-scale treasure from the Warren excavations is often cited by skeptics as evidence that the Templars found nothing of value. If the Knights had discovered the Ark of the Covenant or the Copper Scroll treasure, the argument goes, they would not have left behind any artifacts for a 19th-century British captain to find. But this argument fails to consider the nature of the excavation. The Templars, if they found a treasure, would have removed it, leaving the tunnels empty. The artifacts that Warren found were the tools and the personal effects of the excavators, the detritus of the search itself, not the object of the search. The absence of a treasure is not evidence that the search was unsuccessful. It is simply evidence that the treasure, if it was found, was taken away. The empty tunnels of the Temple Mount are a silent testimony to a quest that may have reached its goal. The Warren artifacts, which are now scattered among the collections of the British Museum, the Palestine Exploration Fund, and other institutions, are a tangible link to the past. They are the physical remains of the men who built the Templar legend, the 9 knights who began the Great Dig and the generations of their successors who carried on the work. The artifacts, which are small and often overlooked, are a powerful reminder that the history of the Templars is not just a story of battles and bank accounts, of popes and kings, but a story of human hands and human tools, of sweat and labor and devotion. The excavations on the Temple Mount were a physical act, an act of faith and ambition, and the artifacts that they left behind are the eternal witnesses to that act. The Masonic and esoteric interpretations of the Templar excavations, which we have touched upon, form a vast and complex body of knowledge that has been developed over centuries by generations of initiates, mystics, and scholars. The central tenet of this tradition is that the Templars, during their excavations on the Temple Mount, discovered not just a treasure of gold and silver, but a repository of sacred wisdom, a secret knowledge that had been preserved by the ancient Hebrews, the Egyptians, and the Greeks, and that had been lost to the world for centuries. This wisdom, which is often referred to as the Prisca Theologia or the Philosophia Perennis, the ancient theology, or the perennial philosophy, was said to be the source of all true religion and all true science. The Templars, who were the inheritors of this wisdom, became the custodians of a secret tradition that was passed down through the centuries, from the builders of Solomon's Temple to the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. The Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry, which is the culmination of the York Rite system, is a dramatic and symbolic reenactment of the Templar excavations. The candidate, who represents a sojourner working on the rebuilding of the temple after the Babylonian exile, descends into a dark and underground vault, a representation of the Holy of Holies. In the vault, he discovers a pedestal on which rests the lost word of a master mason, the secret name of God that was lost at the death of Hiram Abiff, the architect of Solomon's Temple. The discovery of the word is a symbol of the recovery of the ancient wisdom, the gnosis that was hidden beneath the temple. The Royal Arch ritual is a direct descendant of the Templar legend, and it is the central mystery of the York Rite. The vault that the candidate enters is the same vault that the Templars are said to have discovered, and the word that he finds is the same secret that they brought back from Jerusalem. The Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, which is the other major branch of the craft, also contains degrees that are explicitly concerned with the Templar excavations. The Knight Kadosh degree, the 30th degree, is a powerful and dramatic ritual that reenacts the persecution and the martyrdom of the Templars. The candidate, who represents a Templar knight, is led through a series of trials that culminate in his symbolic death and resurrection. The ritual is a reminder of the fate of Jacques de Molay and the other martyrs of the order, and it is a call to fidelity, courage, and the defense of the secret truth. The Knight of the East and West degree, which is part of the same system, tells the story of the Templar refugees who built a new temple in Scotland, a symbolic recreation of the Temple of Solomon in a distant land. The Scottish Rite, in its entirety, is a Masonic retelling of the Templar story, a secret history that is encoded in the rituals and the symbols of the craft. The esoteric tradition that surrounds the Templar excavations is not confined to the Masonic lodges. It is a broad and diverse current that flows through the whole of Western occultism. the Rosicrucian manifestos of the 17th century, which claimed to be the work of a secret brotherhood of Christian initiates, drew heavily on the Templar legend, describing the Rosicrucians as the heirs of a wisdom that had been preserved by the Crusader knights. The alchemists of the Renaissance, who sought the secret of the philosopher's stone, saw in the Templars the guardians of the alchemical tradition, the keepers of the secret fire. The modern occult orders, such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Ordo Templi Orientis, have all claimed descent from the Templars, and they have incorporated the symbols and the rituals of the order into their own systems of initiation. The Templar excavations, which are the historical foundation of this entire esoteric tradition, are the event that set all of these movements in motion. The secret wisdom that the Templars are said to have discovered is often identified with the Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition that seeks to understand the nature of God and the universe through the study of the Hebrew scriptures and the contemplation of the divine emanations. The Kabbalah, which emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries in Provence and Spain, was a radical and esoteric form of Judaism that had a profound influence on the development of Western mysticism. The Templars, who were living in the Holy Land and who were in close contact with the Jewish communities of Jerusalem, are said to have been initiated into the secrets of the Kabbalah by the rabbis of the city. The Tree of Life, the central symbol of the Kabbalah, is said to be encoded in the floor plan of Rosslyn Chapel and in the rituals of the Masonic craft. The Templar excavations, in this interpretation, were a quest for the hidden wisdom of the Jewish tradition, a wisdom that was as valuable as any physical treasure. The esoteric interpretation of the Templar excavations is not, and cannot be, a matter of historical proof. The secret traditions, by their very nature, leave no documentary evidence, and the initiates are sworn to silence. The claims of the Masons, the Rosicrucians, and the occultists are based on the internal evidence of their own rituals and symbols, not on the external evidence of the archives. The historian, who is trained to work with documents and artifacts, is often at a loss when confronted with the esoteric tradition. The truth of the Templar excavations, in the esoteric sense, is a truth that can only be known through initiation, through a personal experience of the divine, not through the study of history. The legend of the excavations is a myth, but it is a myth that has the power to transform the soul. The enduring power of the Masonic and esoteric tradition is a testament to the human need for a secret history, a hidden truth that lies behind the facade of the official record. The Templars, who are the guardians of the temple and the custodians of the secret, are the perfect embodiment of this need. Their excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are the symbol of the search for the hidden wisdom, the quest for the gnosis that will liberate the soul from the bondage of ignorance. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig are the ancestors of every Mason, every Rosicrucian, and every seeker who has ever descended into the vault of initiation in search of the lost word. The political and strategic implications of the Templar excavations, beyond the purely financial and the esoteric, were profound. The possession of a great treasure, whether of gold or of knowledge, would have transformed the Templars from a dependent vassal of the Church and the Crown into an independent power in their own right. The order, which was already uniquely structured as an international, sovereign entity answerable only to the Pope, would have become a force that was beyond the control of any single king or bishop. The excavations, and the treasure that they are said to have yielded, were the foundation of the Templars' remarkable autonomy, an autonomy that was unprecedented in the medieval world and that would ultimately lead to their destruction. The treasure that was hidden beneath the temple was the source of the Templars' power, and it was the magnet that attracted the envy and the greed of their enemies. The rapid expansion of the Templar order in the 12th and 13th centuries, which saw them establish commanderies across Europe and the Holy Land, was a direct result of their immense wealth. The donations of the faithful, which were encouraged by the papacy and by the preaching of Bernard of Clairvaux, were substantial, but they do not fully explain the scale of the Templar financial empire. The order was able to finance the construction of vast castles, such as Château Pellerin and Safed, that were among the most formidable fortresses of the age. They were able to loan enormous sums to kings and popes, acting as the international bankers of the crusading era. The origin of this wealth, which seemed to appear almost magically, has always been a puzzle. The excavation legend provides a compelling answer, The Templars had found a treasure that was already ancient, a hoard of gold and silver that had been buried for over 1,000 years, and they used it to build their empire. The political influence that the Templars wielded, particularly in the courts of Europe, was a direct reflection of their financial power. The kings of France and England, who were constantly in need of funds for their wars, were deeply indebted to the Templars, who acted as their treasurers and their bankers. The Pope, who relied on the Templars for the transport of the funds that were collected from the faithful across Europe, was similarly dependent on the order. The Templars, who were the masters of the international flow of money, were able to manipulate the levers of power in a way that no other institution could match. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which had provided the seed capital for this financial empire, were the ultimate source of the Templars' political might. The fear that the Templar wealth inspired in the hearts of the secular rulers was a major factor in the downfall of the order. King Philip IV of France, who was deeply in debt to the Templars and who coveted their wealth, was the architect of their destruction. The arrest of the Templars on Friday, October 13, 1307, and the subsequent heresy trials, were a cynical and brutal exercise in political power, designed to eliminate a rival and to seize its assets. But the treasury of the Paris Temple, which Philip had hoped to capture, was empty. The portable wealth of the order, including the treasure that had been discovered in the excavations, had been moved, hidden, or spent. The secret that the Templars had uncovered beneath the Temple of Solomon was still safe, beyond the reach of the grasping king. The legacy of the Templar excavations, in the political realm, is the enduring memory of their power and their fall. The Templars, who were once the most powerful institution in Christendom, were destroyed by the very forces that they had helped to create: the centralized monarchy, the papal inquisition, and the avarice of the state. The excavations, which had been the source of their rise, were also, in a sense, the cause of their fall. The secret that they had discovered was too great, too dangerous, and too valuable to be entrusted to a single order of knights. The Templars, who had delved too deeply into the mysteries of the past, were destroyed because they knew too much. The modern political implications of the Templar excavations are still felt today. The Temple Mount, which is the most contested piece of real estate on earth, is a symbol of the conflicts and the aspirations of the three Abrahamic faiths. The search for the lost treasures of the temple, which was begun by the Templars, continues in the archaeological investigations of the present, investigations that are fraught with political and religious danger. The secrets that lie beneath the sacred rock, whether they are the Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll, or the lost scrolls of the Bible, are a source of hope and a source of fear for millions of people around the world. The Templars, who were the first to seek these secrets, are the ghosts that still haunt the Temple Mount, a reminder of the enduring power of the quest. The Copper Scroll, the enigmatic metal document from the caves of Qumran, deserves a more detailed and focused analysis, for it is the only contemporary written record that specifically describes the locations of hidden treasures in the area of the Temple Mount. The scroll, which is composed of two separate pieces of copper that were originally riveted together, was found in 1952 by a team of archaeologists led by the French Dominican priest, Roland de Vaux. The copper, which had oxidized over the centuries, was too brittle to be unrolled by conventional means. It was eventually cut into 23 strips using a high-speed rotary saw at the University of Manchester in 1955, a process that was both delicate and destructive. The text, which was revealed to be in a form of early Hebrew that was similar to the language of the Mishnah, was a list of 64 locations, each one containing a hidden cache of gold, silver, sacred vessels, and scrolls. The total amount of treasure listed on the scroll is staggering, estimated by some scholars to be over 100 tons of precious metal, a quantity that, if real, would represent a significant portion of the national wealth of ancient Israel. The specific descriptions of the hiding places in the Copper Scroll are frustratingly vague and difficult to decipher. The scroll uses a series of cryptic landmarks, many of which are now lost to history, to identify the locations of the caches. It refers to the cistern of the temple, the cave of the column, the tomb of the high priest, and the sealed cave of the Kalel. The landmarks are often described in relation to each other, and the distances are given in cubits, the ancient unit of measurement. The geographical references are clearly centered on Jerusalem and the Temple Mount, and a number of the caches are explicitly located within the precincts of the temple itself. The scroll mentions the cistern that is under the wall, the pit that is near the altar, and the hidden chamber that is in the house of the laver. These references, while obscure, point directly to the subterranean structures of the Temple Mount, the very tunnels and chambers that the Templars were exploring. The authenticity of the copper scroll as a genuine historical document, rather than a work of fiction or a literary exercise, is supported by a number of factors. The copper, which was analyzed metallurgically, is of a type that was used in the Roman period, and the language of the text is consistent with a 1st century AD date. The scroll was found in a cave that also contained other, more conventional, Dead Sea Scrolls, and it was clearly part of the same library of sacred texts. The specific details of the treasure, which include not just bullion but also priestly vestments, sacrificial vessels, and sacred scrolls, are consistent with the inventory of the Second Temple. The scroll, in the view of many scholars, is a genuine record of the treasures that were hidden by the priests of the temple in the chaotic years before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The connection between the copper scroll and the Templars, while speculative, is a compelling one. The Templars, who were living on the Temple Mount and who were actively excavating its subterranean structures, were in a unique position to have discovered a copy of the scroll, or a similar document, that had been preserved in the archives of the ancient Jewish community. The knowledge that such a document would have contained a detailed map to the hidden treasures of the temple would have been of incalculable value. The Templars, who were men of faith and learning, would have had the resources to decipher the cryptic clues and to follow them to their source. The copper scroll is the key, and the Templars were the ones who may have turned the key in the lock. The specific caches that are listed on the copper scroll have been the target of numerous treasure hunts over the centuries, but none has ever been definitively located. The Israeli archaeologist, the late Vendel Jones, who was the inspiration for the character of Indiana Jones, spent decades searching for the copper scroll treasures, using a combination of biblical scholarship, archaeology, and geophysics. Jones believed that he had located the Cave of the Column and that he had found the remains of the sacred anointing oil, the Shemen ha-Mishcha, that was used in the temple. His discoveries, while intriguing, were never definitively proven. The treasures of the copper scroll, if they exist, remain hidden, waiting for a new generation of explorers. The possibility that the Templars discovered one or more of the copper scroll caches is a real one. The order, which had the time, the resources, and the motivation to conduct a systematic search of the Temple Mount, could have found the treasure that the scroll describes. The wealth that they accumulated, which was so vast and so inexplicable, could have been the fruit of this discovery. The copper scroll, in this scenario, is the explanation for the Templar mystery. The 9 knights, who spent their first 9 years digging in the foundations of the temple, were following the clues that had been left by the ancient priests, and they found what they were looking for. The treasure of the temple, which had been hidden for over 1,000 years, was brought to light by the warrior monks of the Crusades. The location of the Templars' excavations within the Al-Aqsa Mosque and its substructures, the legendary Solomon's Stables, is a crucial area of investigation. The Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is the large, silver-domed building at the southern end of the Temple Mount, was originally built by the Umayyad Caliph Al-Walid I in the early 8th century, on the site of an earlier Byzantine church. The mosque was converted into the royal palace of the Crusader kings of Jerusalem after the conquest of 1099, and it was later granted to the Knights Templar, who used it as their headquarters for over 60 years. The Templars made a number of structural modifications to the building, including the addition of a new west front and a series of chapels and offices. But it is the underground world beneath the mosque, the vast substructures that support the southern end of the temple platform, that is the focus of the excavation legend. The substructures beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque are a labyrinth of vaulted halls, known to the Crusaders as Solomon's Stables, which were built by Herod the Great as part of his massive expansion of the Temple Mount. The stables are a series of parallel rows of massive stone pillars, supporting a series of groin vaults, creating a vast, cathedral-like space beneath the surface of the platform. The area, which covers approximately 500 square meters, was used by the Crusaders as a stable for their horses, and the Templars, who were the guardians of the Mount, would have had direct and unrestricted access to this underground space. The stables, which are now closed to the public and have been converted into the Marwani Mosque, were the perfect location for a secret excavation. The vast, dark, and largely unused space provided a cover for the removal of rubble and the digging of exploratory shafts. The specific shafts and tunnels that the Templars are believed to have dug beneath the Al-Aqsa were, as we have seen, partially explored by Charles Warren in the 19th century. Warren, who was working from outside the walls, drove his tunnels toward the foundations of the mosque and discovered a series of vertical shafts that had been cut through the bedrock. The shafts, which were lined with Crusader-era masonry and which contained Templar artifacts, were clearly the work of the medieval inhabitants of the Mount. The purpose of these shafts, which descended to considerable depths, has been a subject of debate. The most logical explanation, in the context of the excavation legend, is that they were exploratory probes, dug by the Templars in their search for the hidden chambers and the buried treasures that were described in the ancient texts. The modern exploration of the Solomon's Stables area has been extremely limited, due to the political and religious sensitivities of the site. In 1996, the Muslim Waqf began a major construction project to convert the stables into a new mosque, the Marwani Mosque, capable of holding thousands of worshippers. The work, which was carried out without proper archaeological supervision, involved the excavation of a large entrance ramp and the removal of thousands of tons of earth and rubble from the interior of the stables. The rubble, which was dumped into the Kidron Valley, was later sifted by Israeli archaeologists, who recovered a wealth of artifacts that dated from the First Temple period to the Crusader era. The sifting project, which is ongoing, has provided a crucial, if chaotic, window into the history of the Temple Mount. The artifacts that were recovered from the Marwani Mosque rubble include pottery, coins, jewelry, and building materials that span the entire history of the Mount. Among the finds were a number of items that are clearly of Crusader origin, including fragments of Frankish pottery, pieces of chain mail, and iron nails that are identical to those found in other Crusader sites. The presence of these artifacts confirms that the Templars were active in the area of the stables, and it suggests that the fill that was removed from the mosque contained debris from the Templar period. The sifting project, while not a scientific excavation, has provided a tantalizing glimpse of the hidden history of the Al-Aqsa substructures. The Marwani Mosque construction was a source of immense controversy and tension between the Israeli authorities and the Muslim Waqf. The Israelis, who were responsible for the security of the site, were unable to prevent the removal of the rubble, but they were able to monitor the work and to ensure that the sifting project was carried out. The Waqf, which is the Islamic trust that administers the Temple Mount, viewed the Israeli intervention as a violation of its sovereignty and a threat to the sanctity of the mosque. The conflict over the Marwani Mosque is a microcosm of the larger conflict over the Temple Mount, a conflict that is rooted in the competing religious and political claims to the most sacred place on earth. The future of the Solomon's Stables area, and of the entire Temple Mount, is uncertain. The political and religious tensions that surround the site make any large-scale archaeological investigation impossible. The secrets that lie beneath the stables, the tunnels and the shafts that the Templars dug, are likely to remain hidden for the foreseeable future. The excavations of the warrior monks, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are a part of the enduring mystery of the Temple Mount, a mystery that is guarded by the guns and the prayers of the present. The specific figure of Hugues de Payens, the founder and first Grand Master of the Templars, remains the most enigmatic and crucial individual in the entire excavation mystery. His background, his motivations, and his subsequent actions all point to a man who was driven by more than just a simple desire to protect pilgrims. Hugues was a knight from the Champagne region of France, a vassal of Count Hugh of Champagne, who was himself a crusader and a patron of the Church. The Count of Champagne, who visited Jerusalem on pilgrimage in 1104 and again in 1114, was deeply connected to the crusading movement and to the esoteric traditions of the time. The court of Champagne was a center of troubadour culture, of chivalric romance, and of the early stirrings of the Grail legend. It was in this atmosphere of piety and adventure that Hugues de Payens was formed. The decision of Hugues de Payens and his 8 companions to travel to Jerusalem and to present themselves to King Baldwin II in 1119 was not a casual or impulsive act. It was a carefully planned and deliberately timed mission. The 9 knights, who were all related by blood or by feudal ties, were a close-knit group of men who shared a common purpose. They were not just adventurers. They were, according to the esoteric tradition, initiates of a secret society, a group of men who were seeking the hidden wisdom of the ancient world. The choice of the Temple Mount as their headquarters, and their subsequent 9-year period of seclusion and excavation, was the fulfillment of a preordained plan. The founder of the order, in this interpretation, was a man on a sacred mission, a quest that had been revealed to him by divine inspiration or by secret knowledge. The relationship between Hugues de Payens and Bernard of Clairvaux is the key to understanding the success of the Templar mission. Bernard, who was the nephew of one of the original 9 knights, André de Montbard, was the most powerful and influential churchman of the age. His decision to champion the cause of the Templars, to right their rule, and to secure the papacy's approval of their order was the act that transformed 9 obscure knights into a global force. The conventional explanation for Bernard's support, that he saw in the Templars the embodiment of his ideal of a new knighthood, is insufficient to explain the depth of his commitment. The excavation legend provides a more compelling explanation. Hugues de Payens, on his journey to Europe in 1127-1128, delivered to Bernard a secret report, and perhaps a selection of the artifacts that had been discovered in the excavations. This secret, which Bernard recognized as authentic and as profoundly significant, convinced him that the Templars were the instruments of God's will. The secret that Hugues de Payens may have delivered to Bernard of Clairvaux is the subject of intense speculation. Some researchers have suggested that it was a genealogical document, tracing the descent of the Merovingian kings of France from the bloodline of Jesus Christ, a secret that would have had explosive political and religious implications. Others have suggested that it was a lost gospel, a text that contained the secret teachings of Jesus, teachings that challenged the orthodox doctrine of the Church. The most plausible theory, in the context of our investigation, is that it was a report of the Templar excavations, describing the discovery of a hidden treasure, the Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll, or the sacred scrolls of the Temple, and that it was this physical evidence, this tangible proof of the Templars' divine mission, that convinced Bernard to become their champion. The secret of the excavations was the foundation of the Templar-Bernard alliance. The role of Hugues de Payens in the subsequent history of the Templars, after the Council of Troyes, is less well documented. He returned to the Holy Land, where he served as the Grand Master until his death in 1136. Under his leadership, the order grew rapidly, establishing commanderies across the Crusader kingdom and beginning to build its financial empire. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which had been the focus of his early years, were presumably continued by his successors. The secret that he had discovered, whatever it was embedded in the institutional culture of the order, a hidden treasure that was passed down from Grand Master to Grand Master, from generation to generation. The founder of the order, who had begun the Great Dig, became a legend in his own right, a figure of mystery and reverence. The tomb of Hugues de Payens, which is believed to be located in the Church of San Giorgio in Verona, Italy, is a subject of some controversy. The tomb, which was discovered in the 19th century, bears an inscription that identifies the occupant as Hugues, master of the militia of the temple. The tomb, which is a simple stone sarcophagus, is a far cry from the grandeur that one might expect for the founder of such a powerful order. The modesty of the tomb is a reflection of the Templar ideal of poverty and humility, but it is also a sign of the secrecy that surrounded the Grand Master. Hugues de Payens, who had begun his career as a seeker of hidden treasures, ended it as a humble servant of the order, his secrets buried with him in the stone. The legacy of Hugues de Payens is the order that he founded and the mystery that he initiated. The 9 knights who followed him to Jerusalem, and who spent 9 years digging in the foundations of the temple, are the ancestors of every Freemason, every Grail seeker, and every treasure hunter who has ever been captivated by the Templar myth. The excavations that they began, and the secrets that they may have discovered, are the enduring enigma of the Temple Mount, a mystery that has outlasted the Crusader kingdom, the medieval papacy, and the Ottoman Empire. Hugues de Payens, the knight from Champagne, is the father of the Templar legend, and his spirit still haunts the stones of the sacred mountain. The involvement of the Jewish community of Jerusalem in the Templar excavations is a dimension of the legend that has been largely overlooked by Christian historians, but that is essential for a full understanding of the mystery. The Temple Mount, which is the holiest site in Judaism, has been the focus of Jewish longing and devotion for 3,000 years. The memory of the lost temple, and of the sacred treasures that were buried beneath it, was preserved by the Jewish sages through the centuries of exile. The Crusader conquest of Jerusalem in 1099 was a catastrophe for the Jewish community, who were massacred alongside the Muslims. But in the decades that followed, a small Jewish community re-established itself in the city, and its members, who were often employed as physicians, merchants, and translators, had access to the secrets of the Mount. The Templars, who were ignorant of the Hebrew language and the Jewish traditions, would have been dependent on local guides to interpret the clues that they discovered in their excavations. The possibility of a collaboration between the Templars and the Jewish sages of Jerusalem is a theory that has been advanced by a number of researchers, notably the British historian Jonathan Riley-Smith in his study of the military orders. The Templars, who were pragmatic and relatively tolerant by the standards of the crusading era, were known to have employed Muslim and Jewish scribes and physicians. They were in regular contact with the local population, from whom they purchased supplies and recruited labor. The idea that they would have sought the assistance of the Jewish scholars in their quest to find the lost treasures of the temple is entirely plausible. The sages, who had a deep and intimate knowledge of the Hebrew scriptures and the oral traditions, could have provided the Templars with the key to deciphering the cryptic clues that pointed to the location of the hidden vaults. The Jewish traditions concerning the hidden treasures of the temple are extensive and detailed. The Mishnah, the oral law that was compiled in the 2nd century AD, contains a number of references to the sacred objects that were hidden beneath the temple before the Roman destruction. The Talmud, which is the massive compendium of Jewish law and lore, elaborates on these traditions, describing the secret chambers that were built into the foundations of the temple by Solomon and by the later kings. The Copper Scroll, which we have discussed, is a product of this same tradition, a written record of the hiding places that was preserved in the caves of Qumran. The Jewish scholars of Jerusalem, who were the custodians of this tradition, were the keepers of a secret that the Templars were desperate to learn. The specific individual who has been identified as the possible intermediary between the Templars and the Jewish community is a shadowy figure named Rabbi Solomon ben Isaac, also known as Rashi, the great medieval commentator on the Bible and the Talmud. Rashi, who lived in Troyes in Champagne in the 11th century, was one of the most brilliant and influential Jewish scholars of all time. His commentaries, which are still studied by Jews around the world, are models of clarity and insight. The town of Troyes, which was also the site of the Council of Troyes in 1128, was a center of Jewish learning, and the court of Champagne, where Hugues de Payens was a vassal, was known for its relative tolerance of the Jews. The possibility that Hugues de Payens was aware of Rashi's work, and that he used it to guide his excavations, is a speculation, but it is a speculation that is grounded in the historical connections between the Templars and the Jewish intellectual world. The idea that the Templars may have discovered, not just the physical treasures of the temple, but the spiritual wisdom of the Jewish tradition, is a central theme of the esoteric interpretation of the order. The Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition that emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries, is said to have been transmitted to the Templars by the rabbis of Jerusalem. The Templars, who were the custodians of this secret wisdom, incorporated it into their own rituals and symbols, and they passed it on to the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians. The excavations on the Temple Mount, in this interpretation, were not just a treasure hunt, they were a spiritual quest, a search for the divine knowledge that had been revealed to Moses on Mount Sinai. The Jewish perspective on the Templar excavations is a complex and often painful one. The Crusaders, including the Templars, were responsible for the massacre of the Jewish communities of the Rhineland during the First Crusade, a catastrophe that is remembered in Jewish liturgy to this day. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Temple Mount, presided over a site that had been stolen from the Jewish people and that was the focus of their deepest religious longings. The possibility of a collaboration between the Templars and the Jewish sages, in this context, is a sign of the complex and often contradictory nature of the medieval world, a world in which violence and cooperation, persecution and respect, could exist side by side. The secret of the temple, which was hidden beneath the sacred rock, was a secret that belonged to the Jews, but it was the Templars who, for a brief moment in history, had the power to uncover it. The Knights Templar and the Ark of the Covenant is the most powerful and resonant strand of the entire excavation legend. The Ark, which is the gold-plated chest that contained the tablets of the Ten Commandments, is the most sacred object in the Hebrew Bible, the throne of God on earth, the dwelling place of the divine presence. Its loss, after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonians in 586 BC, is the great unsolved mystery of biblical history. The Ark has been the object of quests, legends, and speculations for 2.5 millennia, from the time of the prophet Jeremiah, who is said to have hidden it in a cave, to the modern era, with the fictional adventures of Indiana Jones. The idea that the Ark was discovered by the Templars, who were the guardians of the Temple Mount, is the ultimate expression of the Templar mystery, the belief that the warrior monks of the Crusades had found the most powerful relic in the history of the world. The biblical account of the Ark of the Covenant, which is found in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, describes its construction, its contents, and its powers in vivid detail. The Ark was a rectangular box, approximately 4 feet long, 2.5 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high, made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. On its lid, which was known as the mercy seat, were 2 golden cherubim facing each other, their wings outstretched. The Ark was carried by the Israelites through the wilderness. It was present at the fall of Jericho, and it was eventually placed in the Holy of Holies of Solomon's temple, a chamber that was entered only by the high priest on the Day of Atonement. The Ark was a physical link between the God of Israel and his people, and it was believed to possess a terrifying and awesome power. The fate of the Ark after the fall of Jerusalem to the Babylonians is a subject of intense debate. The second book of Kings, which describes the destruction of the temple, does not include the Ark in the list of the treasures that were carried off to Babylon. The prophet Jeremiah, according to the second book of Maccabees, hid the Ark in a cave on Mount Nebo, the mountain from which Moses had viewed the Promised Land. The exact location of the cave, according to the text, was to remain a secret, until God gathers his people together again and is merciful to them. The Ark, after the fall of Jerusalem, simply vanishes from the biblical narrative, leaving behind only a trail of legends and hopes. The possibility that the Ark of the Covenant was not removed from the temple, but was hidden in a secret chamber beneath the Holy of Holies, is a theory that has been advanced by a number of archaeologists and biblical scholars. The temple, which was a complex of buildings and underground chambers, was a fortress as well as a sanctuary. The priests, who had warning of the impending Babylonian siege, could have concealed the Ark in a deep, hidden vault, sealing the entrance and hoping that it would be preserved for a future restoration. The Babylonians, who sacked the city and burned the temple, may never have discovered the secret chamber. The Ark, in this scenario, has been lying beneath the Temple Mount for over 2,500 years, waiting to be discovered. The Templars, who were the masters of the Temple Mount in the 12th century, were in a unique position to have found the Arkansas. Their excavations, which were conducted in the substructures of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the surrounding areas, could have led them to the secret chamber. The discovery of the Ark, which would have been an event of earth-shattering religious significance, would have transformed the Templars from a band of obscure knights into the most powerful and the most holy order in Christendom. The Ark, which was the throne of God, was the ultimate source of divine authority, and its possessors would have been able to claim a status that rivaled that of the Pope himself. The specific evidence that the Templars may have found the Ark is, of course, circumstantial and speculative. The sudden rise of the order, the immense wealth that it accumulated, and the esoteric traditions that grew up around it all point to the possibility of a great discovery. The descriptions of the Templars' secret rituals, which were extracted under torture during the heresy trials, include references to a mysterious head or idol that was worshipped by the knights. The Baphomet, as it was called, has been interpreted by some researchers as a representation of the Ark, or as a reliquary that contained the tablets of the law. The Baphomet Confessions, which are a dark and confusing part of the Templar story, may be a garbled memory of the Order's most sacred possession. The Ark of the Covenant, if it was ever in the possession of the Templars, is now lost, hidden again in some secret location, perhaps in the crypt of Rosslyn Chapel, in the tunnels of Oak Island, or in some other remote and inaccessible place. The Templars, who were destroyed by the greed of a French king, took their secret with them to the grave. The Ark, which is the most powerful and the most dangerous relic in the world, remains hidden, waiting for a new generation of seekers to uncover it. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which were begun by the 9 Knights in 1119, are the beginning of that quest, a quest that is still ongoing, a quest that has become a permanent part of the human story. The esoteric symbolism of the Temple of Solomon, which is the central focus of the Templar excavations, has been a rich source of mystical and philosophical speculation for centuries. The temple, which was the dwelling place of God on earth, was a microcosm of the universe, a physical representation of the divine order that governs the cosmos. Its dimensions, its materials, and its rituals were all imbued with a profound symbolic meaning. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Temple Mount and who, according to legend, discovered the hidden secrets of the building, were the inheritors of this sacred geometry and this esoteric wisdom. The Gothic cathedrals that they helped to build, the Masonic rituals that they inspired, and the occult traditions that they spawned are all expressions of this temple symbolism. The dimensions of the Temple of Solomon, as described in the Book of Kings and the Book of Chronicles, were based on precise mathematical proportions that were believed to reflect the harmony of the heavens. The length, width, and height of the building were all multiples of the sacred cubit, the unit of measurement that was revealed by God to Moses. The Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, was a perfect cube, a symbol of the perfection of the divine nature. The pillars of Jachin and Boaz, which stood at the entrance to the temple, were symbols of the dual nature of the universe, the masculine and the feminine, the active and the passive. The Templars, who were the masters of the Temple Mount, were the initiates of this sacred geometry, a knowledge that they encoded in the architecture of their own churches and commanderies. The materials that were used in the construction of the temple, which included gold, silver, cedar wood, and precious stones, were also symbols of the divine nature. Gold, which is incorruptible, was a symbol of the eternal, unchanging nature of God. Silver, which is reflective, was a symbol of the purity of the soul. Cedar wood, which is resistant to decay, was a symbol of the immortality of the spirit. The precious stones, which were embedded in the walls of the temple, were a representation of the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 signs of the zodiac. The Templars, who were the treasurers of the medieval world and the patrons of the great cathedrals, understood the symbolic value of these materials and used them to create buildings that were images of the temple. The rituals that were performed in the Temple of Solomon, which included the daily sacrifices, the burning of incense, and the ceremonies of the Day of Atonement, were a symbolic representation of the relationship between God and humanity. The high priest, who entered the Holy of Holies once a year to intercede for the sins of the people, was a type of Christ, the ultimate high priest who offered himself as a sacrifice for the sins of the world. The Templars, who were a religious order of warrior priests, were the inheritors of this sacrificial tradition. Their own rituals, which were conducted in secret and which were later condemned as heretical, may have been an attempt to recreate the ancient ceremonies of the temple, to connect with the divine through the power of symbol and ritual. The Temple of Solomon, in the esoteric tradition, is not just a building, it is a symbol of the perfected human soul. The outer courts of the temple represent the body, the holy place represents the soul, and the Holy of Holies represents the spirit. the innermost sanctuary where the divine presence dwells. The Templar quest for the hidden treasures of the temple is, in this symbolic interpretation, a quest for the lost center of the self, the hidden spark of divinity that lies buried beneath the debris of the ego. The excavations that the Templars conducted in the foundations of the Temple Mount were a physical representation of the inner work of spiritual transformation, the digging that must be done to uncover the true self. The enduring fascination with the Temple of Solomon, which is the focus of the Templar excavations, is a testament to the human need for a sacred center, a place where heaven and earth meet. The Temple Mount, which is the most contested place on earth, is a symbol of this need, a need that has driven the Crusades, the archaeological quests, and the esoteric searches of the past 3,000 years. The Templars, who are the guardians of the Mount and the excavators of its secrets, are the eternal symbols of this quest, a reminder that the search for the sacred is the central drama of the human story. The specific locations of the Templar excavations, as they have been mapped by Warren and other explorers, reveal a systematic and targeted search pattern. The shafts and tunnels were not random. They were clearly directed towards specific areas of the Temple Mount, particularly the southeastern corner, the area of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the region around the Dome of the Rock. The concentration of the Templar artifacts in these areas suggests that the Knights were focusing their efforts on the places that were most likely to contain the hidden treasures. The Dome of the Rock, which stands on the site of the Holy of Holies, was a natural target. The legend that the Ark of the Covenant was hidden in a secret chamber beneath the rock is an ancient one, dating back to the earliest days of the Jewish exile. The Templars, who were the guardians of the Mount, would have been aware of this legend, and they may have attempted to verify it. The search for a secret chamber beneath the Dome of the Rock is a central theme of the excavation legend. The rock, which is known as the foundation stone or the Even HaShatiyah, is the most sacred place in Judaism, the spot where the Ark was placed and where the divine presence was manifested. The rock, which is now enclosed within the Dome of the Rock, is a massive, irregular outcropping of the native bedrock, with a small cave-like cavity beneath it. The cavity, which is known as the Well of Souls, is believed by Muslims to be the place where the souls of the dead are gathered, and by Jews to be the entrance to the hidden chamber where the Ark was concealed. The Templars, who had access to the Dome of the Rock, which they had converted into a church, could have explored this cavity and attempted to locate the secret vault. The Dome of the Rock, which was built by the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik in 691 AD, is one of the most beautiful and sacred buildings in the world. Its golden dome, its intricate mosaics, and its elegant proportions make it a masterpiece of Islamic architecture. The Templars, who conquered Jerusalem in 1099, converted the Dome of the Rock into a Christian church, which they named the Temple of the Lord. They added an altar, a choir, and a series of chapels, and they used the building for their own religious services. The Templars' occupation of the Dome of the Rock, which lasted for less than a century, gave them a unique and privileged access to the most sacred site on the Temple Mount. The possibility that they used this access to conduct secret excavations in the rock beneath the building is a real one. The Well of Souls, the cave beneath the foundation stone, has been a subject of intense speculation for centuries. The cave, which is reached by a flight of stairs that descends from the floor of the Dome of the Rock, is a small, irregular chamber, with a low ceiling and a rough floor. The walls of the cave are covered with the graffiti of pilgrims, and the atmosphere is one of deep and ancient mystery. The tradition that the Ark of the Covenant is hidden in a sealed chamber beneath the cave is a persistent one, and it has been the inspiration for numerous treasure hunts. The Templars, who were the first Europeans to have unrestricted access to the cave, could have explored its depths and searched for the hidden entrance to the secret vault. The explorations of the Well of Souls that have been conducted in the modern era, including those by Captain Charles Warren and by the Israeli archaeologist Dan Bahat, have not found any evidence of a hidden chamber. The rock beneath the Dome of the Rock appears to be solid, without any large cavities or tunnels. The tradition of the hidden Ark, in this view, is a myth, a product of the religious imagination. But the Templars, who were working in the 12th century, before the modern era of scientific archaeology, may have believed in the myth and acted on it. Their excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the past, were a response to a legend, a quest for a treasure that may never have existed. The search for the hidden chamber beneath the Temple Mount continues to this day, despite the political and religious obstacles. The Israeli archaeologist, the late Vendel Jones, claimed to have located the entrance to the secret vault using a combination of biblical scholarship, geophysical surveys, and rabbinical traditions. Jones, who was the inspiration for the character of Indiana Jones, was a colorful and controversial figure, whose claims were never definitively proven. The search for the Ark, which was begun by the Templars in the 12th century, is a quest that has been taken up by a new generation of explorers, a quest that is driven by faith, curiosity, and the enduring power of the legend. The fall of the Templars in the early 14th century, and the subsequent dispersal of their treasure, is the final chapter in the excavation mystery. The arrest of the Knights by King Philip IV of France on October 13, 1307, was a sudden and violent event that shattered the order. The Templars, who had been the most powerful institution in Christendom, were now the victims of a ruthless campaign of persecution and propaganda. The charges of heresy, idolatry, and sodomy, which were extracted under torture, were a cynical fabrication designed to justify the seizure of the order's assets. But the treasure that Philip sought, the gold and the relics that the Templars were said to possess, eluded him. The vaults of the Paris Temple were empty, and the portable wealth of the order had been moved to a place of safety. The fate of the Templar treasure, which included the fruits of the excavations on the Temple Mount, is one of the great unsolved mysteries of history. The fleet of the Templars, which was anchored at the port of La Rochelle on the French Atlantic coast, vanished on the night before the arrests, according to legend. The ships, which were laden with the order's portable wealth, sailed to Portugal, to Scotland, and perhaps even to the New World, carrying the treasure beyond the reach of the French king. The Shroud of Turin, which we have explored in another episode, may have been part of this treasure, the secret Baphomet that the Templars had venerated in their chapter meetings. The Ark of the Covenant, if it was in the possession of the Templars, may have been hidden in the crypt of Rosslyn Chapel, or buried in the Money Pit on Oak Island. The exile of the Templars to Portugal, where they were reconstituted as the Order of Christ, was the most successful and enduring of the order's transformations. The Portuguese Templars, who were protected by King Dinis, changed their name and their allegiance, but they retained their lands, their wealth, and their secrets. The Order of Christ, under the leadership of Prince Henry the Navigator, became the driving force behind the Portuguese voyages of discovery, the exploration of the African coast, and the discovery of the sea route to India. The treasure that the Templars had brought from the Holy Land, the gold and the knowledge that they had accumulated, was the seed capital of the age of exploration. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which had begun the Templar story, were the distant origin of the Portuguese Empire. The survival of the Templar tradition in Scotland, where the order was sheltered by the excommunicated king, Robert the Bruce, is another strand of the treasure mystery. The Templars, who fought at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, according to legend, were rewarded with lands and titles, and their secrets were preserved by the Sinclair family, the Lords of Rosslyn. The Rosslyn Chapel, which was built in the 15th century, is a monument to the Templar legacy, a stone library of esoteric symbolism that may contain the clues to the location of the hidden treasure. The treasure of the temple, which was brought to Scotland by the fugitive knights, may still be buried in the sealed crypt of Rosslyn, waiting to be discovered. The modern treasure hunts that have been inspired by the Templar legend, from the Oak Island money pit to the Rennes-le-Château mystery, are a testament to the enduring power of the excavation story. The belief that the Templars discovered a great treasure, and that they hid it in a secret location before their destruction, has driven generations of seekers to dig, to search, and to speculate. The treasure, whether it is the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or simply a vast hoard of gold and silver, is the ultimate prize of the Templar quest. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which were the beginning of the story, are the foundation of this global treasure hunt. The legacy of the Templar excavations, in the form of the treasure hunts, and the esoteric traditions that they have inspired, is a permanent part of the modern world. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig in 1119 could not have imagined the consequences of their actions. Their quest for the lost treasures of the Temple of Solomon has become a universal myth, a story that has captivated the imagination of the world for nearly 1,000 years. The treasure, if it exists, may one day be found. But the search itself, the quest for the hidden truth, is the true treasure of the Templars, a treasure that is available to all who have the courage to seek it. The modern archaeological techniques that are being applied to the study of the Temple Mount, despite the political and religious obstacles, are slowly transforming our understanding of the site. Non-invasive methods, such as ground-penetrating radar, GPR, magnetometry, and 3D laser scanning, have the potential to reveal the subterranean structures of the mount without the need for physical excavation. GPR, which uses radio waves to image the subsurface, has been used successfully at other archaeological sites to detect buried walls, chambers, and voids. The application of these technologies to the Temple Mount could provide a detailed map of the tunnels, the cisterns, and the hidden chambers that the Templars explored, and could perhaps reveal the location of the secret vault that they were seeking. The use of LiDAR, light detection and ranging technology, which creates high-resolution 3D models of surfaces, has been employed to document the existing structures of the Temple Mount in unprecedented detail. The 3D scans, which are capable of capturing the finest details of the stonework, can be analyzed to detect anomalies, such as hidden doors, sealed passages, or areas of differential weathering that might indicate the presence of a concealed chamber. The digital record that is being created by these scans is a permanent archive that will survive the inevitable decay of the physical buildings, and that will allow future generations of researchers to explore the Temple Mount in a virtual environment, without the political and physical risks of a physical excavation. The sifting of the rubble that was removed from the Marwani Mosque construction in 1996, which we have mentioned, is an ongoing project that has yielded a wealth of artifacts. The Temple Mount Sifting Project, which is based in the Tsurim Valley National Park in Jerusalem, has processed thousands of tons of soil, recovering over 500,000 artifacts that date from the Stone Age to the modern era. The artifacts, which include pottery, coins, jewelry, and weapons, are being studied by a team of archaeologists and volunteers, and they are providing a new and detailed picture of the history of the Temple Mount. The Sifting Project, while not a substitute for a scientific excavation, is a remarkable example of salvage archaeology, a way of recovering the lost history of the Mount from the debris that was discarded. The political and religious obstacles to the archaeological investigation of the Temple Mount are immense, and they are unlikely to be resolved in the near future. The Mount, which is the third holiest site in Islam and the holiest site in Judaism, is a place of constant tension and conflict, and any physical intervention on the Mount is seen as a provocation. The Israeli authorities, who are responsible for the security of the site, are unable to conduct any large-scale excavation without the consent of the Muslim Waqf, which administers the Mount. The Waqf, which is deeply suspicious of any Israeli involvement, has consistently refused to allow any archaeological work on the Mount, viewing it as a violation of the sacred site and a threat to the Islamic character of the area. The standoff between the two sides is a reflection of the larger Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and it is unlikely to be resolved until that conflict is settled. The future of the Temple Mount, and of its hidden secrets, is therefore uncertain. The political and religious passions that surround the site make any large-scale archaeological investigation impossible in the current climate. The secrets that lie beneath the sacred rock, the treasures and the scrolls that the Templars may have discovered, are likely to remain hidden for the foreseeable future. The excavations of the warrior monks, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are a part of the enduring mystery of the Mount, a mystery that is guarded by the guns and the prayers of the present. The quest for the lost temple, which was begun by the 9 knights in 1119, is a quest that is still ongoing, a quest that is now in the hands of a new generation of scientists, diplomats, and seekers. The enduring legacy of the Templar excavations is the question that they have left behind, a question that is inscribed in the very stones of the Temple Mount. What did the 9 knights find in the darkness beneath the sacred rock? Was it the Ark of the Covenant, the copper scroll treasure, the lost books of the Bible, or the secret wisdom of the ancient Hebrews? Or was it nothing at all, a legend that was born in the silence of the medieval chronicles and that has grown into a global myth? The answer to that question is buried beneath the Temple Mount, a place that is, after 3,000 years of conflict and devotion, still the most mysterious and the most sacred place on earth. The impact of the Templar excavations on the collective imagination of the West is a subject that transcends the boundaries of history, archaeology, and religion. The legend of the 9 knights, who spent 9 years digging in the foundations of the Temple of Solomon, has become a foundational myth of the modern world, a story that has inspired crusaders, Freemasons, treasure hunters, and seekers of every description. The excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are the historical event that has given birth to 1,000 legends, 1,000 quests, and 1,000 theories. The Templars, who were the protagonists of this story, are the eternal symbols of the search for the hidden truth, the quest for the lost wisdom, and the struggle against the forces of tyranny and greed. The influence of the Templar excavation legend on the literature and the film of the modern era is immense. The novels of Dan Brown, particularly the Da Vinci Code, have brought the Templar mystery to a global audience, sparking a renewed interest in the order and its secrets. The character of Indiana Jones, the archaeologist adventurer who searches for the Ark of the Covenant in the 1981 film Raiders of the Lost Ark, is a direct descendant of the Templar treasure hunters. The video game series Assassin's Creed, which features a secret war between the Templars and the Assassins, has introduced the legend to a new generation of players. The Templar excavations, in all their mystery and their romance, are a permanent part of the cultural landscape. The psychological and spiritual meaning of the Templar excavations is a subject that has been explored by philosophers and theologians. The quest for the lost treasure, which is the central theme of the legend, is a metaphor for the human search for meaning, for purpose, and for the sacred. The descent into the underground vault, which is the act of the Templar excavation, is a symbol of the descent into the unconscious, the journey into the depths of the self. The treasure that is sought, whether it is gold, scrolls, or the Holy Grail, is a symbol of the inner gold, the divine spark that lies hidden within every human soul. The Templar excavations, in this reading, are not just a historical event, they are a model of the spiritual life. The ethical dimension of the Templar excavations is a subject that is often overlooked. The excavations, which were conducted on a site that was sacred to 3 religions, were a violation of the sanctity of the Temple Mount, a violation that was justified by the Templars' belief in their own divine mission. The pursuit of treasure, whether it was for the glory of God or for the enrichment of the order, was a dangerous and a morally ambiguous enterprise. The fall of the Templars, which was the result of their own arrogance and their own secrecy, is a cautionary tale about the dangers of the pursuit of power. The excavations on the Temple Mount, which were the foundation of the Templar Empire, were also the seeds of its destruction. The enduring power of the Templar myth is a testament to the human need for a secret history, a hidden truth that lies behind the facade of the official record. The Templars, who were the guardians of the temple and the custodians of the secret, are the perfect embodiment of this need. Their excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are the symbol of the search for the hidden wisdom, the quest for the gnosis that will liberate the soul from the bondage of ignorance. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig are the ancestors of every Freemason, every Rosicrucian, and every seeker who has ever descended into the vault of initiation in search of the lost word. The story of the secret excavations in Solomon's Temple is, in the final analysis, a story about the human quest for the sacred, a quest that has driven pilgrims to travel thousands of miles, knights to risk their lives, and scholars to dedicate their careers. The Temple Mount, which is the center of this quest, is a place of immense power and mystery, a place where the divine and the human have met and struggled for millennia. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig in 1119 were the instruments of this quest, the agents of a destiny that they could not have foreseen. Their excavations, whether they were a systematic search for treasure or a symbolic act of devotion, were the foundation of the Templar legend, a legend that has captivated the imagination of the world. We have journeyed together through the history, the archaeology, and the esoteric traditions that surround the mystery of the Templar excavations. We have examined the evidence of the tunnels beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the artifacts that were discovered by Charles Warren, and the tantalizing clues of the Copper Scroll. We have explored the legends of the Ark of the Covenant, the lost scrolls of the Temple, and the secret wisdom of the ancients. The mystery of what the Templars found beneath the Temple Mount remains unsolved, but the quest to answer that question has been a journey of discovery in itself. The Templars, who are the guardians of the Temple, are the eternal symbols of the search for the hidden truth. Their excavations, which were conducted in the darkness of the 12th century, are a reminder that the sacred is not found on the surface of things, but must be sought in the depths, in the hidden chambers of the earth and the soul. The 9 knights who began the Great Dig are long gone, but their spirit lives on in every seeker who is willing to descend into the darkness, to confront the unknown, and to claim the treasure that lies waiting at the heart of the mystery. The quest for the lost treasures of the Temple of Solomon is a quest that has no end. It is a journey that takes us from the dusty archives of the Vatican to the windswept tunnels of the Temple Mount, from the ancient scrolls of the Essenes to the modern Masonic lodges. It is a journey that challenges us to question the nature of history, the power of myth, and the limits of human knowledge. The truth of the Templar excavations may never be fully known, but the search for that truth is a noble and enriching endeavor. The legend of the 9 knights is a gift that has been passed down to us through the centuries, a story that continues to inspire, to challenge, and to transform. We are the inheritors of this legend, and we are the ones who will pass it on to the generations yet to come. Before we part, I have a small but vital request. If this deep dive into the secret excavations in Solomon's Temple has ignited your curiosity, please leave a like right now. It helps this video reach more history lovers, and we are marching toward our goal of 1,000 likes. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell, so you never miss a new episode when we uncover another hidden chapter of our shared past. Your comments are the compass that guides our future explorations, so write down your theory below. What do you believe the Templars found beneath the Temple Mount? The Ark of the Covenant, the Copper Scroll treasure, or something even more mysterious? Share this video with a friend who loves historical mysteries. Let's grow this community of seekers together. I hope you enjoyed this content, and I'll see you in the next video.